Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday, January 20th, 2022 meeting of the Finance Committee. Tonight we'll be meeting in Zoom format only. We'll be following the published and posted agenda. The first item on that agenda is an approval of minutes from our meeting from September 23rd, 2021.
Would you like a motion?
I would like a motion, please.
I will move to approve those meeting minutes.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
I abstain.
You abstain. You were not there. That's fine. Kathy's not with us this evening. All right. They are approved. I will also vote in favor. Moving along, we have a review and discuss a request by the Department of Public Works for Finance Committee reserve funds.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. DPW Director Gary Persichetti is on the call this evening. We have a reserve fund transfer to address boiler issues at the Byam and Harrington schools. And I'll ask Gary to sort of walk us through it and explain the timing issue with this request. Thank you, Gary.
Good evening. So what has happened, and I summed it up in the when these boilers were purchased 22 years ago to 20 years ago, there was 3 boiler companies that were manufacturing high performance 95% full modulating condensing boilers, which was what you needed to do to start saving lots of money within a town. The issue with that is the life expectancy for them was not a fully established because they were recently in the market. So at the time, they were figuring they would last probably 20 to 25 years, and some do depending on the situation of how often the cycles are run. But as time went on, they locked in and started saying that the average was 15 to 20 years. So we're at that mark with some of them. What we've had happen is we had a boiler at the Harrington School, one boiler at the Byam School that have both marginalized, and it's come to the point where the cost of repairing them is almost the same as the cost to replace. So the smart and the proper way to do this would be to replace the boilers in one school, the Byam, with brand new, all new. Take the 3 offline, 1 that is no good, 2 that are still in working condition, take 1 up to the Harrington and reinstall that one there so that we're back to 3 boilers in that building. It would give us 1 spare boiler to have as a backup if needed. And if you're not aware, we went in front of your committee already and appropriated the funds to do the boilers at the high school. We're just waiting for town meeting to do that. Those boilers are the oldest eco boilers, within the town. And just to give some perspective, if you went back to the high school when the boilers were purchased and installed, and the BTUs were brought down, and we did away with the big tank that used to store the water, we had saved $81,000 in the first year, which continues every year, even though you don't see it. So in a lifetime, that's $1.6 million. So I think the efficiency of them, I think the worth of them will prove that they should be continued within the town of Chelmsford. And I think we'll continue with the cost savings. Getting much more out of it for cost savings, above the 81 or the smaller amounts in the elementary schools. These are the same efficiency, so you're not going to really pick it up here. Just to give you some other perspective, every school except for one, which is the steam boiler school in that South Row, have these boilers. So we will continue on this pattern. The other thing that was found out during the life history of the boilers are the more you have, the longer they last because of the cycles. That means that if you're running 5 boilers, they're going to cycle 1 out of every 5 versus if you're running 3, it's 1 out of every 5. And then, of course, Chelmsford does have a little issue with water. It's always been known it's hard water, which doesn't help with some scaling. Any questions? And I'm sorry, in the budget.
Yeah, you want to talk about the schedule for doing this work and why we're doing a reserve fund request as opposed to bringing it to town meeting in April?
The schedule is we want to do this over the February position, because we want to make sure that we have enough boiler power. Technically, you know, an average school with 3 boilers can run with 2 on most days. But when you drop below certain temperatures for a period of 2 to 3 days in a row, that's when you really need it. And then, of course, you lose one redundancy, which is something you don't want to be doing. So we want to do this over the February vacation and bring the building back up. And the budget and schedule calls for $245,000 to be able to do.
All right. Any questions?
Gary, I assume that timing is based on confirming the boilers are actually available?
Yes, they've already been confirmed, and they are available. Yes.
And you did address my concern, or my question rather, regarding the timing and the availability of a special town meeting, where in fact you have a situation where you want them install them during February vacation in town. I believe that's the same timeline of when the actual town meeting, the special town meeting will occur.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can we just? I believe that there was a use of funds from the Finance Committee reserve from the fall town meeting. Was there a vote on that, or did we? No. Oh, that, I'm thinking of
that was.
No, I'm thinking of spring.
Yeah.
So we're fully funded. The request is coming in at. Just repeat the amount.
245,000.
245,000. Okay.
Yes.
So it was the 155 for the rest of the year. Any other questions? All right. Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote on the transfer from the Finance Committee Reserve Fund. David,
I'm in favor of it.
Anita, I'm sorry. Can you say it again?
I'm in favor.
Sam, John,
I'm in favor.
Eric,
Aye, yes.
and I will also vote aye.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe you've already said the transfer document. I'll execute it and send it back. Do you need
Thank you,
a
Brian.
original copy or right away, or we'll
Nope.
scan suffice?
Nope, whenever
Okay.
you,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. Moving right along, we have a presentation review of Warrant Article 1 concerning obtaining a secure public right-of-way for Esther Drive.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee. Again, Gary Persketti's on the call with me. I'm also Virginia Crocker-Timmons, on the Select Board Chair, is on the call as well. As the committee be aware, the Select Board and others and the town officials have been trying to address the safety issues on Ledge Road for some time, and continuing a number of efforts to do that. You may also recall that we went to town meeting previously a year ago in April and obtained an easement to secure a bus turnaround on Ledge Road. As we move forward with that, the property owner, who also owns additional property on Ledge Road, basically brought forward an alternative solution that was acceptable to the parties involved, and that involved the private drive off of Ledge Road known as Esther Drive. And so we work with town council, the DPW engineering and surveying and so forth to develop an easement plan, which is in the packet, and the cost estimate to perform the work and so forth. And what we're seeking is the approval of the town meeting for the easement to provide the bus turnaround for student safety on Ledge Road. So what will take place is the town will surface the existing roadway on Esther Drive and be responsible for maintenance moving forward, as well as including snow and ice removal. And basically that's what the benefits being accrued to the town and to the property owner under this arrangement. And so, we just think that, that this is an effective solution to improving the safety of those school children who reside on a roadway that has significant commercial truck traffic.
Any questions?
Paul, I think you mentioned cost or estimate, but there's nothing in the slide deck that has a dollar amount that I saw?
Right, yeah, we're not seeking additional appropriation. We have sufficient monies in our road appropriations through our capital budget, as well as the $1 million that we appropriated last fall, as well as the Chapter 90 funds to incorporate this work into our our road construction budget. Again, there's an existing roadway surface out there, so we're not basically plowing ground soil. We're basically putting a bituminous surface on what's over there, and that's basically it. So that's why we're not requesting a funding request. We're requesting legal authorization to secure the easement for the town.
Thank you.
My only question is, why can't it wait for the normal meeting?
Because we really want to get out there as soon as the weather will permit, and I don't want to. I just don't want to be in a situation where an accident that could have been avoided, could have been avoided, and I think that's the situation. We have residents who have been patient and are looking to have this done, because we had anticipated we would have had it completed by now. So we want to get out there as soon as the weather conditions allow, and then again improve the student safety as early in the spring as possible. The problem is, if we go to the town meeting at the end of April, we really wouldn't have it done at any time for this current school year.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Well, I don't know how to bridge the real question I have, so I'm just going to spit it out there. Because I don't understand why we're having a special town meeting, given the current pandemic conditions that exist and the number of town meeting members that are categorized as over 60 or 55, and therefore could easily be exposed to additional risk. I don't understand why we're taking that risk with our town meeting reps. So, I mean, we can go through all these things today and vote on them, but why are we doing this?
I don't know. I guess I'll answer the question if I don't know who it was addressed to. What I can say, the driving force behind this town meeting is the latter articles regarding the rezoning of the Umass West Campus and the affordable housing that will be constructed as part of that project. The planning board, select board, and the abutters and project proponent have been working for months, to reach an agreement, on a pathway forward. I think obviously that we've had an extreme spike in COVID in the last few weeks. It appears, based on the latest data that been available to us, that the peak has passed, and I guess I'm hopeful that in 5 weeks, when town meeting convenes, that it will be a safe environment. If it's not, then I don't envision that the town meeting would move forward. But I think that was the decision made at the time when and again, circumstances are changing very rapidly in the COVID environment that we're in right now. And as obviously as we get closer to the 5 weeks from now, I think there'll be an assessment made as whether to proceed with the meeting. But
Yeah, well, Paul, who makes that assessment and under what criteria? I mean, is it 5%? Is it 8%? I mean, what is the criteria under which you make the final decision whether you're gonna have the meeting or not? Because my perception is we've made the decision and we're gonna have the meeting.
Well, I think when the time comes, there's a warrant that's posted for a town meeting to convene on Thursday, February 24th. I think as we near that the town moderator would consult with the health director and have an assessment as, in terms of, is this safe to proceed? There's two things that'll happen. The answer would be no, and then they would postpone the meeting, and he would go out there that evening like we've done in the past and adjourn it to a later date. The other scenario is they would say, let's move forward with the meeting, and provided that a quorum of 81 people arrive, that's then the meeting would proceed. If there's no quorum, there will not be a town meeting. So ultimately, the answer is going to lie in if the decision is to move forward, it would fall with the actions of the town meeting reps as to whether we have a quorum on that night, on the 24th. So again, one thing I've learned with this pandemic is not to predict too far ahead. We saw where we were 5 weeks ago versus where we are now, and hopefully things will be a lot better 5 weeks from now as we move forward. But I think that's how it'll play out. Is the moderator, I think, would convene with the health director to see if there's a decision to postpone. If not, if they move forward and if the town meeting reps decide with their feet not to attend the town meeting, then there'll be no town meeting action that night, and it'd be a postponement.
Okay, there's no point in debating it beyond this point. We'll go on with the meeting, but I have discussed it with the town moderator, who says it's not his decision. So, I go on record as being very concerned about us scheduling a meeting in the middle of a pandemic with no clear criteria.
David.
I'm going to finish my sentence. With no clear criteria as to how we would delay it if necessary.
All right. David, we can certainly, if we need to, discuss under our review and discussion and vote any further discussion or public comment, but I think at this point we need to move forward with the agenda as posted.
Sure.
All right, any further discussion regarding specifically Article 1? All right, Article 2, 4th Avenue parcel, 18-75-4.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a ministerial action of which you've encountered in the past, where the town acquires parcels of property by tax possession. And in this case, it's a parcel of land that abuts an adjoining town-owned parcel of land. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to John Souza, our finance director, who's worked closely on this issue with town council to advance this possibility of a donation offer to the town. So John, if you want to pick it up from here.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee. This action came about as a result of a meeting I had, a brief meeting last October with a property owner, a resident in town. They own a small parcel of land on 4th Avenue in North Chelmsford. It's parcel 1875-4 on you'll see it on the next slide. It's actually it's boxed in green, and only a few of the numbers are visible. And right to the right, because of space reasons, you don't see it, but right to the right of that green boxed in area is the small parcel that the town currently acquired through tax possession back in 2014 that Town Manager Cohen spoke of. So it's immediately to the right. Basically, if a property owner decides to stop paying taxes and indicates that they no longer want to own a piece of property, we really have two different methods that we can follow. One is that as treasurer, I can perform a tax taking. Ultimately, it requires the town to file a foreclosure case in land court. Those can often take 2 to 3 years or more. I can tell you with the pandemic, it had slowed down very slow. And it's not uncommon to have cases on certain parcels languishing there for 3 or 4 years. So in this case, it's a small parcel. It abuts another piece of town-owned property. The parcel that we're looking at here has an assessed value of $4,500. The area, it's about 1,620 square feet. I've been working with town council. Town council has prepared documents that are necessary to complete the transfer of ownership from the private owner to the town. Under this section of law, it's a 2-step process. To accept the donation of land, it requires the approval of the select board, and it also requires a positive vote at town meeting. I brought this matter before the select board back on October 25th, and the select board voted unanimously to accept this donation. So the next step in this process is to move forward to town meeting and bring it before the body for consideration.
All right, thank you. Any questions regarding Article 2? All right, seeing none, moving right along. Article 3.
Article 3 is a request to fund a collective bargaining agreement that the town has reached with this Public Safety Dispatchers Union. This agreement covers a 3 fiscal year period that actually would run through 30th of this year, so just 5 months from now. It's a request to fund the agreement as calculated by the town accountant Darlene Lucio's office is $82,050. And because we had put money aside in collective bargaining because the tax rate set, the funding source is the General Stabilization Fund towards this agreement, which again we'll be funding the last 6 months of a 3, going forward over a 3-year period. How the agreement was reached, it does fall in line with the pattern of settlements for the town during this period, basically 2% per year. But because of the fact of where we are in time, under state law, the town meeting can only fund a labor agreement that's for the current fiscal year and the previous fiscal year. So we cannot actually do retroactive back to the first fiscal year or fiscal year 20 for this group or for any group outside of what you see separately under a labor action such as the JLMC, which you see for police and fire, which, as you're aware, goes for a multi-year period. So basically, because of that, we did a 0% because we couldn't fund the first year, and then did 4% for the previous fiscal year, and then 2% for the current fiscal year. So you can see it equates to the 6% or 2% per year over the 3-year period. Because of the fact that we cannot provide retroactive pay for that first fiscal year, the agreement that was reached, and in fairness, we estimated what the 2% would have been for those employees, and it come out to roughly $1,500. But because we can't pay prior to that previous fiscal year, it becomes a $1,500 agreement for those who are current and formerly in the bargaining unit as of July 1st of 2020. So that's basically what the agreement is. And we'd asked your support for this settlement. The select board has met and has supported and taken a vote publicly to support this agreement. And we seek your support, and then obviously the support from town meeting to basically bring them current under a labor agreement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Any questions?
I just have one.
Yep.
Paul, if I followed that, and apologies if I didn't. So since they can't get anything for 2020, that's why they got 4% in 2021, but they're also getting a one-time payment of $1,500. Isn't that doubling up? Like two solutions to one problem?
No, because what happens is we calculate the retroactive pay for each year individually. So we can't provide anything in 20, okay? So what happens is we sort of provided the $1,500, which would have been the 2% they would have earned in the first year, which is the 0, or the year that we can't go back to. Then the pay scale for that second year is 4% because it's the 2 plus the 2. So then Darlene calculates for fiscal year 21, what is the retroactive pay for that individual fiscal year, okay? And then for the current fiscal year, she then does the calculation for the new base, which is the 4% plus the 2% for basically retroactive back to this past July 1, and then going forward to this June 30th. So there is no double counting. Basically, what we do is we make them equivalent if they had reached an agreement of 2% for each of the 3 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Paul, how many members are in this bargaining unit?
9.
9. Thank you. Any further questions? Hearing none, go on to Article 4, the form ice rink refrigeration system.
Yeah, thank you. This really is a timely issue, and I'll ask Gary to sort of explain where we've been the last several weeks and where we are today. But we're in a situation where the Forum ice rink refrigeration system, which was purchased and installed in 1985, needs to be replaced. We had a situation back before the holidays where the Forum was shut down for a week because of basically a total failure of the control system and refrigeration system at the Forum, which we think may have been caused by a power surge when 2 of the 3 phases of power into the Forum were lost. We are pursuing a claim with our insurance company for the damages to the equipment and costs incurred as a result of that period. And so basically, facilities, the rink management company, and really, Gary Perschetti and Melissa Joyce, who are the sort of feet on the ground people there at the Forum, work to achieve a reoperation of the current system, but we're on borrowed time. And the reason that we're seeking to fund this now rather than in April is the time to replace the ice system is during the spring/summer period, basically from May to August when the Forum is shut down, because the demand for the facility and the scheduling and everything is so critical that we wouldn't want to lose it during season. So I'm going to ask, and this is something that this isn't something that sort of came out of the blue for us. We've been working the last couple of years at looking at the replacement of the system, and we were looking at solar for power, and there's also issues with electricity that's powered, the amount of electricity that's available to the site and so forth in terms of the transformers and so forth. So what I'm going to do is turn the presentation now over to Gary Perschetti, who can really bring it into the nuts and bolts of what's transpiring and what's going to take place under this article. So Gary, I'll turn it to you now.
Good evening again. I will not try to take too much of your time, but I do have to move backwards to move forward. We have been working probably close to 2 years on figuring out a way to change the entire chiller system and bring everything, all the controls, the entire boiler room totally up to date. And in trying to do that, we were working with a solar company as well, and we want to put solar on the roof of the building to offset a lot of this cost. And then with the changing times and the formation of the new committee, which is the replace the energy committee, the push is to have it go to an electric chiller. One problem with the Forum is the Forum runs off of 208 volt power now. To do any electric chiller, you need 480. So that's a complete upgrade from National Grid, new transformer coming in, bringing a portion of it, well, the entire boiler room up to 480, but then dropping down with a drop down transformer to take care of the rest of the building back to its 208 for lighting, for bathrooms, for everything else that runs within the building. So as we progressed with this, we were looking at the ability to pay for probably at least 70 or 80% of this cost through a 20-year solar system on the roof of the building. Unfortunately, the structural review of it would not allow it. The building cannot take the solar because of the year it was built and the structure it is and the distance in the beaming of the building. So just to let you know, we have not totally given up. We are starting now after hopefully getting this done, because this was a lot of work to prepare and get ready. We plan on going back to the solar company and see if there's any ground mount, even of a smaller size, anything we can do to offset some of this cost as we go forward. So taking you past that, as Paul has explained, we did take an electrical hit to the building. And what it did, we had a failure in our control panel. Control panel component was installed in 1985 and has been in there. The picture you're looking at with the gentleman in the panel, you're not gonna believe this because I think we had a big sign from the guy upstairs. I was able to get back with the former company that ran the building for us. He was able to put me in touch with that gentleman who installed this panel in 1985. Semi-retired, only does a little work for somebody. I called him up, he was able to come out. And he had some parts, believe it or not. He had an old computer that you see in front of him that has Windows on it. He had a RS-232 connection, which has been out, not used for years, but was used on boilers. He was able to put us up and running. Where we were heading with our insurance company before finding him, we were looking at renting a chiller that would sit outside, being generated at $40,000 a month with $1,000 a day in fuel to keep that building open. When he was done, we were able to reopen the building with one cat generator instead of two, because the other one has been marginalized now and needs $37,000 worth of work, and it's 60 years old. So we are running, the building is up and running. We believe we should be able to limp through this season and be able to continue with the form, and that's why we want to get it closed down and start on this work. So as I said, a lot of the equipment in this building some of it is up to 60 years old, some of it is newer. So basically what we're doing is we're blowing up the room where everything is going to come out, except for one piece, because it's only 11 years old, and it's all going to be redone. We run into two issues with that. Simply the first chiller plant, which is a package unit, a plant package that we wanted to put in there. Once you would have put it in there, you would not legally have the room to work around the entire thing because the size of it and the smaller size of the room. So then it does a problem. Do you want to pay to have the room made bigger? Absolutely not. So what we're going back to similar to what you're looking at in that lower left-hand picture where you're seeing two yellow pieces. Those are the two cat motors now. So we will have smaller plant packages that will, be run together, and you'll have your redundancy and be able to do it. All the controls will be new, everything will be new. We'll have brand new transformers bringing into the 13.8 power and dropping it down to 480. And we will be able to control everything like you want to on today's market, like we do all the schools in the town buildings, by looking at a computer and be able to see what's going on, make adjustments. So that is our goal. So we have been working with Simco on a package unit. As I said, we need the major electrical upgrade that is necessary for it. Aiming to do this the summer of 22, and sorry to say it will probably now go into October, and that's because originally I believe this special town meeting was slated for January timeframe, but the COVID has already pushed it out, so if it goes out again, I'm not sure we'd be able to fit it in off the off season, which means there'd be another decision to be made. So the reality of life is we lost only a week. And the only reason why we did lose a week, even though we did get the system up in about 2 days, was there was a warm period out there, so we lost the ice and had to bring it back and make it skatable again. And we did that in between Christmas, and I believe, the week before, I believe we opened right after the holiday, back up and put everybody back in. So I'll take any questions or answer whatever you want.
Any questions?
I'm sorry, I do, yep. The request is $1,538,000.
So is that a change from the 1.458 that's in the slide?
Yes, I believe something was sent out by Melissa Joyce. When
Yeah, that's right.
when
She
was
mentioned that
doing
there's
the
a
figures,
issue.
there was an $80,000 line item that was under the electrical, and she accidentally put it in as 8,000 instead of the 80. And we wanted to correct that immediately, and we apologize for that happening.
No, that happens. Okay. So I'm sorry. The correct figure is 1.5.
$1,538,000.
538. Thank you.
That's just taking the 1,458 and then
Now the 72,000.
yeah, 80, yeah.
Any questions? All right. Hearing none, we'll now move along to Article 5, the Umass West Multifamily Overlay District.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and members of the Finance Committee, Article 5 is a zoning article to adapt an overlay district, which, as I mentioned at the outset, was work that's taken place over the last several weeks, going back months now, I guess, between the planning board, the select board, and the proponent developer on the site. I'm going to now, Evan Belansky, our community development director, is on the call, and I know there's a couple members of the planning board. I'm going to ask Evan to just give a sort of an overview, and then we do have the developer, Melissa Robbins, representing the developers, on the call as well, who can really dive into the nuts and bolts of what's being requested here. So Evan, you have some introductory remarks on this article?
Sure. Good evening. I'll be very brief because I know that the proponent has a very comprehensive presentation to give to Finance Committee that they've been giving to other boards and committees and neighborhood groups over the last 3 to 6 months. So as Paul said, this is an overlay district. And just to set the stage, as I briefly mentioned, Trimble Crow has been engaged with the town, primarily the planning board and select board, for upwards of since March, I believe. It's been an extended period of time. During that time, Town Council Paul Haverty has been at the meetings, assisting the planning board, providing some technical assistance, and there's been a variety of neighborhood outreach, which Trimble Crow I think will likely present as part of their presentation this evening. Within the last several weeks, the planning board did finish their required zoning public hearing. They did vote 6-1 in favor to recommend approval at town meeting. So with that, I will pause, and I believe Melissa Robbins and Mark Baranski from Trimble Crow have a presentation.
Yes, good evening, members of the commission. My name is Attorney Melissa Robbins. I'm from the law firm of Farrell and Robbins. Thanks, Paul and Evan, for the introduction. We do have a very comprehensive presentation that we've given to other boards and departments. I think it goes through each section of the project that's being proposed, subject to the overlay district. It's not within the purview of this commission, but there is a separate development agreement that's been crafted with the Board of Selectmen. That's additional mitigation that's over and above this overlay district that's will detail as part of this presentation as well. We've actually added a couple slides where we think that there'd be specific information that would be of interest to your committee. So with that, what I'd like to do, and I don't know who's in charge of the presentation, but it will actually be Mark Baranski that will be sharing the slides. So I don't know if he needs to be made the presenter or if he can just be given control of the screen, and I will turn it over to Mark.
I can add him as a co-host.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Finance Committee. As Attorney Robbins has noted, we were asked to provide the same presentation that we have in past to various boards, department groups, and further abutters and neighbors. And so this is fairly lengthy. I will present it. We do have all our professional consultants available if there are questions afterwards. But, maybe in the interest of being timely, I'll address the broader items, and then members of the Finance Committee can certainly ask questions directly of consultants if they so choose, if that's okay. And I think I'm going to request to share the screen. Is it up? I can't tell, unfortunately, if it's up.
It says you started sharing screen,
Oh.
but it's showing currently.
Pardon?
It says that you have started sharing your screen, but there's nothing showing.
There's nothing showing. Okay, well, try.
There we go.
Is it up? Okay, great. Sorry for that delay. This presentation, as I mentioned, this is a presentation we made to numerous neighbors and abutters and various town, at various public meetings. I will note that where we have amended or adjusted, we've made note of that, so we'll refer to earlier revisions or of the project, and then the final iteration of the project, just so there's some clarity on how the project has evolved over time. Obviously, I believe everyone's familiar with the site. It is the Umass Lowell West campus site at 255 Princeton. The abutters are those certainly on Princeton, in the Windermere and Meadowwood communities, and on Whiteman Street, as well as, as the streets coming off Princeton. This is just a brief table of contents on some of the items we'll be addressing. The development team, so it is important to note, and I believe Mr. Hedison is available to speak afterwards. This is a partnership between Trammell Crow Residential, which will be developing the bulk of the market rate units, and Choice SCG, which will be developing around 54 or more age-restricted affordable units. Our team, as noted here, is the architectural team, which has done much of our architectural work, and Alna Major, which has been our civil engineer on most of our projects. We self-perform our work, so we will be the general contractor on the projects. As you heard earlier, Attorney Robbins with Farrell Robbins was our local counsel. We also have Nutter, McLennan Fish. MDM Transportation Consultants is our transportation consultant, needless to say. On-site engineering is our wastewater consultant, because we will be building a private wastewater treatment plant on the site. And Copley Wolf Design Group is our landscaper. I will make one more comment. Unfortunately, the firm that prepared the fiscal report, Mark Fougere and Associates, he's not available. I believe the report has been made available to you. And certainly if there are detailed, certainly if there are questions, we'll answer them. And if there's more detail needed, we can revert to Mr. Fougere when he's available. The Choice SCG team, is noted, is Icon Architecture, Civil CHA. Delbrook will be their construction partner, and KJP Partners is their legal consultant. So again, this is the site, as I think you're probably all aware. The buildings on the site that were shown prior have been demolished. There is some rubble in the area, in the foundation areas, but all the buildings have, for now, have been raised. Our original thought for this project was that we would build 2 4-story structures comprising about 282 units, 2 3-story walk-ups comprising 48 units, 10 townhomes, and then the Choice SCG structure, which would be a 3-story structure of about 54 units, would be at the front of the site. That has since been changed, and now we're proposing that the townhomes will be at the entrance to the site. This is effectively an extension of Bruyette Street. This is the intersection of Bruyette and Princeton. And the Choice building will now be located on this radius as it enters the site. We then revised it a bit more in that feedback from abutters was that the treatment plant location for the private wastewater treatment plant that I referred to While it was well over 150 feet from the abutters in Meadowood, there was some discomfort there, and we agreed to move it even further, so that I'm sorry, wrong way. So we moved it even further away from the abutter lot lines. I'll talk a bit about the wastewater treatment plant. It does not create meaningful sound. It doesn't create any odors. We're very comfortable with the plant. Our residences are within 80 feet of the structure, but in the interest of attending to the desires of the abutters, we have moved it. And then lastly, we made one final change, which is feedback from the fire chief, was that although a 3-story walk-up structure is allowable pursuant to life safety and building code, they would really prefer that we provide an elevator service. So we have now taken those 2 distinct 3-story structures and combined them with a central elevator to support them. So again, 282 units in 2 4-story structures, one 3-story 48-unit structure, one 3-story 54-unit structure by Choice SEG, and then 10 townhomes. This is a summary of some of the adjustments we've made based on feedback from the abutters and from the town. We will be pursuing a conservation restriction for this wetlands area. The idea is to create somewhat of a wildlife reserve. It is based on feedback I've received from the town. Such a large parcel of wetland is fairly unique in the area, and it was thought to be a good idea to basically save that for migrating birds and for remote viewing. We've moved the townhomes further off the lot line. We've also moved SCG Choice's structure further from the light line based on feedback from Whiteman Street. As I mentioned earlier, we relocated the treatment plant further from lot lines. A big item of concern from the Windermere and Meadowood and frankly the Whiteman Street abutters was maintaining the healthy vegetation that creates visual buffers now and that will once our buildings are built. And we've committed to preserving all trees as they are right now. There are certainly some trees that are probably not healthy that may have to be removed, but we want to keep all the trees. There was also a request that we integrate a fence system, a 6-foot or more fence that will run around our lot and pretty much keep our residents separate from our butters. We've incorporated that. As I noted, we've combined what was 2 structures into one, and we've introduced an elevator there. The town also requested that we incorporate a playground for the children. We've added that there. And then lastly, it isn't noted, but we're looking at a pocket park, and that'll be in coordination with Concom because it would be in buffer areas, but a park that would allow for our butters and neighbors to view that wildlife conservation restricted area. So as Town Manager Cohen mentioned, and as did Town Planner Belansky, we've had numerous meetings with abutters, with the planning and select boards, with department heads and departments themselves to massage and manipulate and change this program to respond to the needs and concerns of the town and our neighbors. This is just a roll-up of the mix of the unit types and in the structures. It's a range of structures. As I said, there's some townhomes here. So our goal is to provide a breadth of unit types that will be desirable to a broad range of consumers. The traffic summary, this gets fairly technical, and probably I would defer to Bob Michaud or Dan Dumay to speak to this if you'd like us to get in greater detail on this. I don't, if Mr. Clancy, would you like our consultant to get in more detail on this, or should we defer to if there are questions later?
What's the will of the committee? Do we want a little more detail, or should we defer questions for later? Anita, you're muted.
Can we get like a high-level summary of the traffic report? Like, just quickly.
Sure.
Yeah. You glad to do that?
Yeah, this is Dan Dumay with MDM Transportation Consultants. You can stay on this slide, Mark. This one will be good. Here's the site here. The study intersections comprised of the site driveway with Brulette. We look down at the 3A Route 4 intersection down to the west and the Wood Street intersection to the east. This depicts a 10-minute walk, about a quarter mile, so it's pretty walkable. There's a couple bus routes in the area, and you can walk down to the shopping plaza, down at the Middlesex Shopping Plaza down there at Wood Street. So we go to the next slide. So in total, the first column here are the apartments. These are the number of trips to be generated by this project in total. So you have the apartment units, townhomes, and the 3-story stacked flats. On the first column, age-restricted, choice development in the middle, and the townhomes for a total. So we're looking at approximately 135 to 165 peak hour trips, predominantly with exiting in the morning, going to work, and coming back in the afternoon. The predominant movement is coming back in. We looked at a journey to work to see where these people are going to go to work. Some of them are going to go to the T, some are going to go down to the highway, the majority of them down to Route 3. So if you go to the next slide, it's going to show you the morning peak hour. And as I said, the majority of the trips are headed down Wood Street and North Road, headed down to the highway to Route 3. You got some trips head over Princeton Boulevard into Lowell, and then a small portion up 3A to the north. So they spread out pretty well through the area. If you go to the next slide, it'll be the same thing for the evening. Again, very similar trips. The majority coming up Route 4 and Wood Street from the south, and Route 3 coming back in from Lowell, and then slowly down Princeton Street, 3A from the north. Very manageable numbers. So we looked at operations at these key gateway intersections, which is on the next slide. This is going to be the morning peak hour. Again, the Princeton Route 4 intersection is the one on the top. We looked at baseline conditions and with the project, Princeton Brulette, and then at Wood Street. So you can see all of the intersections. They operate at level service C or better on this slide. Any movement in particular is D or better, which is well accepted within the level of operations for an urban environment that this is. If you go to the next slide, it'll show you the evening
Can I
peak
just
hour.
ask a question?
Sure.
What data, what year did you look at for traffic?
So we counted in 2021, and then we did an adjustment for pandemic factors and seasonal adjustment to bring back everything up to pre-pandemic conditions.
Okay.
But for clarity, Dan, these are updated numbers from the initial presentation that was given
These
to
are-
the planning board and to the select board regarding the traffic study.
These are the same exact numbers that has been seen the entire time. So the base traffic counts were in 2021, but we adjusted them to be post-pandemic, so when everything kind of went back to normal, based on permanent count station data provided by Mass DOT in the area. But it is in fact the same exact data that the selectmen and all the neighborhood groups and the planning board and everybody has seen.
Okay. Thank you.
So in the afternoon, we're at D or better operations. So you can see between the baseline conditions and the project, there's no real change in impact. The project is well supported within the area. Go on to say that all of the study intersections are going to see less than a 5% increase in trips at the two gateway intersections, the signals on each end at 4 and Wood Street. Generally wouldn't even require studying as part of a Mass DOT permit. When we put this together, we want to capture everything and look at the key gateways, so that's what we included in our study. If you go to the next slide, as part of the project out in the front, we're going to do a crosswalk to get the patrons from our site over to the existing sidewalk system on Princeton Street. As part of it, not only going to stripe a crosswalk with ADA compliant ramps, But we're gonna add rapid flashing beacons, which have pedestrian actuated push buttons. So they'll flash when you push the button, activate it and then it would help you cross the street and increase the visibility at that location. The project's also going to go to the next slide. The project's going to include a pretty robust list of Tdm programs. These are transportation demand management programs to reduce trips from the project from single occupant vehicles. So let's quickly go through them. The on-site coordinator is going to kind of run things. Join the Middlesex 3 TMA membership, which will give them some services, rideshare, other programs and incentives. There's RTA Transit in the area. They're going to give preferred parking for carpools, van pools, car share space if somebody would want to put a car share vehicle there. Electric vehicle charging stations. Look at a transit pass subsidy for people that when they first move in. Commuter assistance programs. The pedestrian infrastructure that's going to include connecting to the sidewalk system and that rapid flashing beacon. Bicycle racks. And then secure covered bike parking within the buildings. And then they're going to do unbundled parking, so you could rent one or fewer parking spaces, or you could rent 0 parking spaces if you didn't actually have a car, to give that as an incentive to people. If you go to the next slide, it'll basically be kind of a summary of what we're looking at. Alternative transportation in this area is about 17%. Based on residents that exist in the census. We didn't take any reduction for that in the project, and it resulted in limited roadway impact, no change in level of service compared to the baseline conditions. We're going to connect sidewalks to the building and parking areas, as well as that high visibility crossing with RRFB, bikes racks for visitors. The driveway is going to be designed for safety criteria for sight distance. It's going to be designed to adequately accommodate emergency vehicles, the Chelmsford ladder truck, as well as delivery vehicles. And then there's going to be maintenance of the sight lines to keep visibility of vehicles exiting the site. The Traffic Advisory Committee provided a letter on this that says they're going to continue to work with the town on these items, such as the rapid flashing beacon. This is the letter that they came here. So they're going to do everything that they've requested, and they're in support of the project. So that's a quick overview. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have. That's traffic kind of in a quick 5-minute nutshell. I go back to Mark.
Are there questions, or shall we proceed to the next topic?
Actually, I might have a question, and it may be directed actually towards Gary. I think Gary's still on the meeting. Gary Persichetti. I see that he's included in this letter. Was there any and Gary, if you're not, that'll be Mark. Excellent.
I'm here. I am.
Was there any discussion or concern over the planned work on the Rourke Bridge that's coming up in the next few years?
I don't believe there is. If the project itself is going to happen the way they said, I mean, I think everyone's aware that originally, and I don't know if they changed it to the other side, the CVS, part of the reason why it moved is I believe the new Rourke Bridge is going to come across where that is, so it's going to move slightly over to the left, if that's what they do. So that I think they want to make sure that it's open the whole time. So I would think we should be okay during that period of time. I mean, it's almost no different than any construction that's happening, within the town of major stuff like, of course, what's been going on in Billerica Road right now, which is hopefully coming to an end fairly soon.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess a question for Dan. Just for clarification purposes, because some of the slides were a little small. The trips to Route, you mentioned trips to Route 3 as being a major thoroughfare, obviously, people be headed towards. And you said that you split it, and correct me if I'm wrong, and that's what I'm trying to clarify. You said split it evenly heading towards Wood Street versus heading towards Route 4?
That's correct. We had it split pretty evenly. We believe people are going to do it based on time of day and which way is easier to go. They would come back one way versus another. My guess is in the morning when the Wood Street down through the Walmart and all those other plazas is less busy, they'll probably make a right turn and go down that way. And then a slightly higher proportional, I'm going to come back Route 4 with an easy right turn and right into the site. But they're pretty much close to 50-50 between those two routes.
Okay. Thank you.
Chairman Clancy, if David Hedison, could I mention one small item regarding traffic?
Of course.
Okay, David Hedison, CHA Choice. When we looked at this parcel originally, we were quite stressed about the traffic as we were looking at a 100-plus seated restaurant, which was across the street. So this traffic study does not take into consideration, the 400, it's about 440 less trips per day since the Glenview has been redeveloped. So that is nowhere mentioned. So that's just, I think, a nugget of information for those of us that live in Chelmsford or have worked in Chelmsford for a long period of time, that there was a net loss of about 440 trips per day with the closing of the Glenview. That's all I wanted to add. Thank
And
you.
Dave, is that not captured in the presentation?
That is not captured. So they're showing the trips that will be generated based upon 2021 data. And at that time, the Glenview was not in use. So I'm just saying to you, the neighborhood in itself, when we looked at it, we were looking at adding about this number of trips on top of the 400. It was like 490 or 500 trips per day. So overall, we've had a net loss, which was great as far as for traffic purposes.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
for clarification, we don't believe that traffic's coming back because that site's been redeveloped, so that we don't need to add it in, but it is a benefit that it's not there, that's for sure. As part of the project, they're going to, if allowed by Mass DOT, looking at adding speed radar signs along Princeton Street in the area, hopefully slow people down a little bit within that area. And then the project itself is going to donate some funds over to the Route 4 side for some design, help with the design over there.
So is it my understanding they're talking about the Richardson Road interchange, that area?
That is correct. And Mark could give you the financial numbers on that. I'm not sure what the exact agreement was.
Okay. Thank you, Dan.
Yep. Be glad to address that towards the end of the presentation. Any further questions on traffic?
Please go ahead.
All right, thank you. Again, with civil engineering, if I can maybe provide a broad brush, and then if there are more detailed questions, Tim Williams from Allen & Major Associates is available to speak. The reason that we brought our civil engineer to various public meetings was that there was concern about water movement on the site. The obligation of any new project being developed in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is that it be compliant with stormwater management programs such that no water that lands on the site leaves the site. That may not have been the case in the past, and I've been told that there have perhaps been issues, but that is the obligation and the expectation of our project, that all water that hits our site will be managed onto our site. And there's a couple ways that we tend to do that. We will bioretain water via parking lot islands, which here are a couple examples. There will also be engineered solutions on the site, and ultimately this will all be engineered and run past the state for their acceptance. There will be some infiltration basins which will also manage water. And then lastly, I'll use the popular term Coltech. We will utilize Coltech basins to aggregate water. The water will be treated, particulates will be removed, and then that water will basically be put in these basins. Generally, these basins are located underneath our parking lots, where it will be recharged back into the water table, which is really the optimal strategy for taking the water and putting it down into the ground as opposed to diverting it through storm sewers or other systems away from the site and away from the water table. I don't know if there are any questions on this subject. As I said, Tim Williams is available to speak in greater detail if you'd like that.
Any questions? All right, none. Please proceed.
I will again do a broad brush presentation on the wastewater treatment plant, but we have Dave Formato from On-Site Engineering available to speak in greater detail. As everyone I believe knows, there is a moratorium on sewer connections into Lowell's system, and that predicated our analytics are looking at a private wastewater treatment plant. On-site engineers has been designing private wastewater treatment plants throughout eastern Massachusetts for quite some time. There are actually, based on the substrate in this general area, quite a few plants in the immediate area in Westford, Littleton, Acton, and so forth. I can tell you that this was an issue that I think gave initial pause to some of our butters. I think there were perceptions of, kind of open water, municipal plants and things that we're not going to be doing, and I think it kind of made people nervous. Over the course of the summer, we did share some of these locations, the specific addresses of some of these locations with private plants, and it gave those people that checked it out great comfort in understanding that these plants do not create odors, they create very little sound, and in fact, in many cases, if you didn't know to look for it, you wouldn't know that it's there. A couple examples that we can provide is the Princeton Westford wastewater treatment plant in Westford, Massachusetts, built in 2014. It has an active odor control system that is available but is not needed. The structure itself looks like sort of a maintenance structure, and it's populated very close to residences. As I mentioned, the proof is in the pudding. If there were negative detrimental sound or odor impacts, these developers wouldn't be located on them. Generally, the plants that are generally the areas that are disseminating the water once it's been treated, and pursuant to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, this water basically has to be fully treated to potable water. It has to be more or less drinkable water that then again gets distributed via leach fields, much like the Cultec basins, and recharges the water table. In the realm of things, this is much better, again, than having water that flows from the site and then gets distributed via sewers to some remote location. This is better for the overall water table. Village Green at Littleton, again, built about 7 years ago. System is adjacent to residential buildings in the clubhouse. Looks a little bit like kind of a barn or maintenance shed. And then Graniteville Woods in Westford looks like a lovely New England barn located next to residential buildings. There's been some unfortunate misunderstandings that have been distributed amongst the town members that, again, that this is some sort of open treatment plant. This isn't. This is a system that has proven to be quite successful throughout eastern Massachusetts. It's one that we're comfortable incorporating, and in fact that we did incorporate in our project in Rentham, Massachusetts. Dave Formato, I don't know if you'd like to add anything to my, fairly broad comments.
Sure, thanks, Mark. Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee, thanks for having me again. Dave Formato with On-Site Engineering, for the record. Mark did a great job. He's done this a few times already, so as you can tell, he's kind of stealing my thunder. But I will just say that it's important to understand from a environmental perspective, the permitting with these types of facilities is very rigorous. It's essentially a year-long process with the state. It is a state permit, and it involves 2 steps. It involves assessing the site to understand what impacts, if any, there are going to be relative to groundwater in terms of flow, direction, mounding, that type of stuff, as well as any impacts to sensitive receptors. That's like the first half of the process. And then once you clear that hurdle and the state is confident that you actually can site a discharge in that location, the next step is actually designing a treatment facility that's appropriate for the level of treatment that's going to be required based upon what any sensitive receptors and stuff like that were identified in the first phase. So it's a very comprehensive process. These systems treat to tertiary level, as Mark mentions. It's essentially treating to groundwater reuse quality, which is far and above pretty much every and any municipal facility that has a surface water discharge because of the nature of the discharge to the ground. Obviously, we're trying to avoid polluting groundwater so that it's not usable as a potential drinking water supply or for recreation. So again, tertiary level treatment, more often not disinfection, odor control system for this facility will be provided. Again, we don't anticipate it will be used, but there will be active odor control in the event that it's deemed necessary. So that's kind of the main points that I wanted to hit on, and happy to answer questions, and I'll be here for the remainder of the meeting.
And
Thank you.
if I could just add, Dave, not only is the state very involved in the permitting and the analytics and assessment, but we will be required to escrow 25% of the overall development cost of with the state, such that if we were to not be immediately responsive to deficiencies with the plant, the state can draw that money immediately and act on it. Is that fairly accurate characterization?
Yep. And I guess in tying in with that too, Mark, operationally, these are actually manned and staffed plants. It's not like a septic system or something along those lines where people just pop in. There'll be a licensed operator who's at the site, 5 days a week, checking things, running tests to make sure the plant's performing properly, making adjustments. So they are manned, they are operated actively. So there is a lot of oversight that goes along with them, in addition to regular routine maintenance and stuff like that. So it's a very robust process. Actually, I just saw today that the state issued permit number 999. So there's just about 1,000 of these currently in use in Massachusetts.
And the slide that I presented in front of you again shows where the movement of the plant from the prior location to its current location. And then just for context, the locations of all the older Umass Lowell buildings as a function of where our structures are going to be as well, just for context. Are there any questions from the committee on this matter?
Yeah, a couple. What's the life cycle on this type of treatment plant?
Yeah, it's in terms of the overall life cycle, 30 plus years or so. There will be obviously mechanical components that will be repaired or replaced multiple times over that life cycle, but things like concrete tankage in the building, you're typically anticipating that those are going to have a 30 to 40 year life cycle.
Warranty?
Yeah, manufacturer's equipment warranties are typically a year. There is, in this particular instance, if we use the membrane technology, the membranes themselves are a pretty robust item, so those typically come with a 10 to 15 year warranty. And they're the kind of critical path items, so they're built to last. So.
To the town, to us, to the town of Chelmsford, if there's a failure, what exposure do we have?
No, and this is because it's strictly a state permit. If there was an issue, the state, the DEP would step in and actively address it through notices of non-compliance or consent orders. Again, as Mark had mentioned, they're required to put 25% of the cost of the facility in an escrow account, a cash escrow account. So, there'll be $400,000 sitting in an escrow account. The DEP is party to that escrow agreement. So in the event that there was an issue that Trammell Crow wasn't addressing, the state could actually tap into that money and use it to be resolved. So there really won't be any level of involvement that the town has to get into.
Last question is, what's the largest capacity? The examples you showed where a building, complex is a lot smaller? What's the largest capacity?
Actually, some of those are, you would think they were smaller, but for example, the Village Green, that target design flow is, I think, 60,000 gallons per day. And for this facility, we're talking about 66. So it's actually pretty apples to apples. There are some big ones. I mean, for example, Gillette Stadium uses this, these types of systems, and they're targeted on a game day is like 300,000 gallons per day. The facility that Mark had mentioned in Rentham, the Tremor actually has a complex at. That's part of a mixed use development. So there's some retail and hotels, which we designed. That one is 105,000 gallons per day. And all that wastewater, treated wastewater goes into leaching fields in the ground. So that's probably a bigger one, but there's 50 to 60,000. There's a lot of them out there, in use currently.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none, thank you very much. Please proceed.
Thank you. So I'll give a broad brush on landscape, and then I'll allow Sean Sanger to speak. The interesting attributes of this site are the topography really is an asset to the site, and certainly the mature and healthy tree cover is also an asset to the site. And it is our intent to use that, to maintain that, to create visual and sound buffers from our neighbors. I don't know how familiar you are with the site. Certainly, they walk around the site, you'll know there's just a lot of trees on the periphery, and that's just kind of a really nice thing that we intend to maintain. It's probably one of our best attributes in addressing some of the concerns of the abutters. Sean, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, the only thing I would mention, Mark, is the other thing, in addition to the vegetation, would be the topography. As you start to look at the direct graphic that's here in front of you, the kind of that green tone is the overlay of the existing tree canopy. Definitely a combination of evergreen and deciduous, as Mark mentioned. But the other really interesting thing here for us, kind of as we look at the overall site in context with the abutters and the adjacencies there, is the topography. I mean, it's a very, very sizable. I think we're in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 feet grade changes, particularly from Windermere or Meadowwoods, getting up to the existing site of the Umass facility. So the combination of the large trees existing, which are wonderful, majority in really good health, and that topography, kind of a combination of that will provide for some very, really, robust buffers that we will obviously be staying out of just due to the complexities of construction, nor do we really want to get into those areas as well. Those are just some shots of the existing trees and the slopes that they're encountering if you're not familiar with those locations, particularly from the Meadowwood side. The other thing we've talked a lot about with them would be the screening. And it's kind of both a visual as well as a physical. Particularly the Windermere and the Meadowwoods folks were very concerned about actually people walking through the property onto theirs. So in addition to the screening, as I mentioned, we're using a pretty robust and a visually attractive barrier edge, if you will, that will keep people basically on their properties. And then the other piece I could just mention briefly. You think about the kind of the screening and the kind of the season that we're in here with the winter. It doesn't have to be evergreen. We can definitely do a lot of the kind of the oaks that hold their leaves really long. So once again, just really picking the plant material to be able to fit in with the context of the existing vegetation. So it's pretty seamless when we're all said and done. Next slide is just some graphics that we've worked with. This happens to be another project in Belmont, but we really worked with trying to help the neighborhood and the abutters start to understand. So while it's not exactly the scenario we're here, but it was a tool we used to kind of use existing photos and then starting to overlay through Photoshop, kind of screening, fencing, plant material sections as well are really, really helpful. And I think it was particularly helpful here as people started to understand that topography and the grade change from the Meadowwood side up the hill to where we're building. So we used exactly these kind of tools. So we went from plan graphics to more sections and three-dimensional elements to help kind of illustrate the context of the development and the adjacencies and the heights of the buildings relative to the abutters. We had well, Mark could tell you, we had quite a few one-on-ones with the neighbors and worked with them to hopefully kind of or calm some of their concerns and give at least a very good and accurate story of the adjacencies and what the new project would be like.
And those meetings are not complete. We are still doing sections to work through solutions for some abutters that have concerns. So that this remains a working process. Any questions on the landscaping?
Mark, what's the highest portion of the proposed buildings on the site?
The highest point?
Highest point, yeah.
So the pitched roofs, I mean broadly for these two 4-story structures, will be around, I think it's 55 feet. I can get you the precise dimension. I don't have it readily available. I think it's about 55 feet.
And then the topography change from, say, that location to either Windermere or Princeton.
Yeah, as Sean said, it's about a 15 to 20 foot delta from here to here. It flattens here.
Right.
Yes.
And here, it's probably coplanar.
Right.
Yeah.
But these structures are 3-story structures or really 2-story plus pitched roof structures here.
Mm-hmm.
So the height goes down.
Similar to the ones that you see a little further down on Princeton.
Yeah, this typology of the townhomes, I would call equivalent to the typology on Whiteman and all these other streets. Again, the choice SCG housing is a 3-story structure with a pitched roof as it's currently iterated, probably around 40-ish feet, give or take. And David could certainly speak to that.
Okay, thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, I believe you've all been made privy to the fiscal impact report that Fougere Planning Development prepared. I have just a roll up. This is a slide that was not This has been presented. Been created specifically for you. Elements of these slides have been conveyed in meetings, but just to clarify that this hasn't been part of prior decks, just so there's no confusion. I can kind of talk to the numbers. I will note that the numbers that Mr. Fougere prepared and the numbers that we've included in our model, there is some variance. Generally, it's on the real estate taxes. Ultimately, mill rates and assessment cap rates will decide what those taxes are, but these are generally what we have anticipated them to be. Further, and this again has been expanded out on a 10-year look. Mr. Fougere had conversations or meetings with the police and fire departments, council on aging, and with Dr. Lang and schools to extrapolate what at least baseline cost impacts would be. So the numbers that we're referring to here, the net benefits, are assumed to incorporate some significant costs for the departments. Maybe not spot on, we may be high, we may be low, but these are the numbers we're looking at. And needless to say, if you want to look at this on a per annum basis, just drop the rightmost digit.
Those are operating costs, right? Those are not just operating budget costs, correct?
Operating, yes. Pursuant to the fiscal report interviews, yes. These are not,
I
want to make sure I understand you. These are not one-time costs? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, so you've taken real estate taxes, that's a 10-year forecast, and the police department expenses a 10-year forecast.
Yes.
Right, to make the numbers look bigger. Okay, got it. But there's nothing in here for capital, infrastructure costs, or any of that stuff.
So infrastructure costs, I guess permit fees would be a one-time fee for the building permit. Noted here.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, with, from a school perspective, all our schools have modular classrooms. So when you look at the estimated incremental kids between residential and apartment building, there's nothing in there to account for those costs.
Well, no, actually, in the meetings with Dr. Lang, and I apologize, we probably should have included, while you did receive the fiscal report, which does refer to school child impact, I did not prepare a slide for that. It's anticipated this project will create between 35 and 49 additional school children into the system. It's worthwhile to note that the underlying zoning of single family is anticipated to create about 35 school children. So I think that one way to look at this is that this project will create a surplus of 0 to 14 school children into the system, but needless to say, with considerably more economic benefit to offset those costs, that the additional costs being incurred.
Correct. But if you look at the midpoint of 35 to 49, you take 42 students versus your 32 students, and then you look at the last 10 years worth of in elementary school and how much that costs per pupil, that ends up being an incremental between a residential versus this project of about $1 million. And that gets borne by the current taxpayers, not, when you look at the impact and the percentage this project brings into our total tax revenue, that will go primarily, that $1 million gets absorbed by a current taxpayer. That is not included in this estimate. Because it's an incremental pattern. Take the average of your 35 to 49 kids, right?
Yeah.
The midpoint of that is 42. Single family is 32. So there's an extra 10 kids. Well, how much do those 10 kids cost in building a school? Because you go to the site, the state sites, and they'll tell you what the cost per school for elementary schools, not high schools or anything, just an elementary school will run you. And that's from 2014 with the estimated enrollment, so you can get a per pupil cost. And this is net cost, right? Because you've got the cost for the school and you've got the state grant, so we're talking net cost here. That ends up being an incremental $1 million.
This is David. Can I ask a question, Anita and Tamar? So when we looked at these studies, we're looking at the Trammell Crow or this whole site generating a surplus annually of what the cost to the community will be of approximately, Mark, what is that number?
Well, the annual surplus projected based on these costs is $780,000 to $885,000.
Annually, okay.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
so it's about, so the delta, Anita, that you're saying, if you take the 42 students as the midpoint, okay? You're looking
Right.
at an annual delta of it being about $200,000 beyond what the projection here is. Because you're
I'm
saying about
looking
$1
at-
million.
This is taking operating costs, right? This is only looking at one small little piece, right? And then again, I'm not taking, it's all development, right? Like when you start adding, there's an infrastructure cost that's not an operating cost, it's capital. And all the taxpayers have to take that up. Now, we're at a kind of a dire strait now with our schools. I mean, our schools are all old. We need to start redoing them, and there's going to be a need. I mean, regardless if we do this project or not, if we bring on this project, it's an incremental average about 10 students. Could be, could be up to 15, right? It could be less than that. I did the average because that's what they gave us. Versus if we did residential development, right? Now, we could not do either one. That's a whole nother cost. But if we were to do an incremental, how much do those incremental 10 students cost us? That's one school. What are the other infrastructure costs that are not captured in this analysis on an annual basis? Because there are, that's all I'm saying. Like, you just need to be careful when you look at these numbers and they're presented, because we can make numbers look as favorable as you want.
These numbers are the best information.
What's not in there.
You're right. We can't anticipate what a one-time infrastructure cost could be. for the schools. Dr. Lang did come and present at the planning boards, and you probably, had said that, we do believe that we will have to make some decisions on how we manage the schools and will there be additional infrastructure. So, but he also said that we cannot really allocate a number to that at this stage, that we would like to do additional studies, and in fact, we're contributing to those studies. I believe we're contributing $180,000 that will be allocated to further studies into the, as per our development agreement. So, yes, you're right. There is infrastructure that we can't anticipate, and, that we're going on the best information that we have.
I know, Mark, in one of the additional meetings in October, I believe it was, where Dr. Lang was speaking, and I and a couple of members of the finance committee attended and asked questions regarding very similar questions to what we're discussing now. And just for clarification purposes, I know one of the things that was brought up during the discussion was that the feeder schools for this particular project, for your particular project, would be Harrington, Parker, and of course the high school. And there's a discussion about how that impact would look at those schools, given the current space, the modular classrooms that are at the Harrington, Parker, and what an increase might look like. I haven't seen it, and I apologize if you had the further discussion. I want to clarify with you. Has there been further discussion about what that might look like, and has Dr. Lang discussed the other possibilities that they'd have to address concerning? I know the study is you've mentioned. There's a funding, and I think that's on the next slide that we'll take a look at. So maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse here. But has there been further discussion about? I know one of the things that was mentioned was possible redistricting again, shifting of the populace to different schools. I just want to get a clarification of where we are in that discussion.
So I want to be very careful about putting words in Dr. Lang's mouth or in the school committee's mouth. So we've not heard anything further on what possible options could be acted upon to address this. I think, again, my interpretation of what Dr. Lang said was that, having additional funds to move forward on deeper dives on those plans is useful. And that was my takeaway.
Okay, but there's not been really further discussion regarding that. Okay.
We've not heard anything further, no.
Want to make sure I hadn't missed anything in the discussion, because that was a source of discussion at that meeting that I attended. So thank you.
And then I'll just jump to the next page, which this refers to some of the mitigation that is being provided via the development agreement. And as Dan had mentioned, in concert with our conversations with the traffic committee, we've committed to provide around $250,000 to allow the town to move forward with its 25% tip design for the intersection of Richardson and North. We're providing money towards the sidewalk fund, again, the radar boards and the rapid flash pedestrian crossing. The radar boards, I think, I believe we're talking about 2 or 3 radar, probably solar powered flashing radar indicators that will be allocated in concert with both the town, and because Princeton is a state road, in concert with the state as well. And we also spoke about traffic signage. That could be signs that say no left turns unless you're a resident into the Windermere and Meadowood communities. I don't think we figured that out, but we know that there's some interest in that from those communities, and we'll work with them on that. We will be donating $360,000, which is 6 units at $60,000 each, towards the affordable unit payment in lieu of fund. The $180,000 will be allocated towards the schools for further studies of physical plant and other needs. And then we've allocated monies, and some of this is is referred to in the development agreement, but it's in our budgets. But There are some manholes and other physical structures that have created issues for the neighborhood that we'll be removing. Some that we wouldn't necessarily have removed because it's not really where we're building, but we know that's an important issue for some of the abutters. Fencing, additional trees, in addition to the tree cover that we've talked about, that Sean's talked about, we'll be adding a lot more trees and foliage to enhance those buffers. And then we've committed to a historical monument that will speak to the history of the site from the time when it was the training school, and that pocket park and some improvements there. As you know, or you may know, we would be drawing water from the North Chelmsford Water District. There's a $5,000 per unit water connection fee. I don't know, I mean, that isn't a benefit that necessarily goes to the town, but it is money that probably will be helpful now in addressing some of the PFAS issues that the North Chelmsford Water District is incurring. And the Choice project will be building not all the infrastructure, but an awful lot of the infrastructure. We're incurring those costs and then transferring those over to the Choice SCG to benefit their site.
Quick question for you.
Sure.
Have we looked at whether the town has any issue with the capacity to supply water to the project?
So we have an email, which I would call will serve email from the North Chelmsford Water District informing us that based on projected consumption rates, they can provide that water. That being said, the Water District requested that we proceed with a water impact study. We funded that study probably 2 weeks ago, and so that water impact study is underway.
And can I ask you about the affordable houses in the 360,000?
Sure.
Does that mean there will not be any affordable housing units with this?
No, that does not. So the project
Okay.
will, yeah, and so that's a great question. Choice SCG will be providing the bulk of the affordable housing in their 54 units. We will have 6 affordable units at 80 AMI on our parcel, on our property. So we'll be at about 16% affordable on the site between the two
Okay.
developments. And so the PILO is above and beyond that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, hearing none. All right, Mark, please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is, I sort of alluded to this, but this is a little bit of a summary of the abutter engagement. I mean, I probably should get to a real number. We've had 50 to 100 meetings with abutters. Some have been in groups, some have been one-on-one. Every abutter has a different perspective, a different concern, a different issue. And I think we've gone to great lengths to meet with those parties, to talk about their concerns, and to the extent we're able to address those concerns. For the village at Middlewood, there is an area of land, which I'm going to sort of note is here. Not terribly well, but it's, I would say it's a triangle of land that is actually topographically at the same plane as Meadowwood. And they have historically used that land, even though it was actually owned by Umass Lowell and by the current landowner. We've agreed to provide an easement to Meadowwood for their ongoing use of that land in this diamond, and also running up. They've been maintaining this strip of about 15 foot off Augusta Way, and so we're easing that over to them. As I've said, we've committed to maintaining the existing tree buffer to the extent that those trees are healthy, and providing additional plantings. And this is going to be one of the largest landscape packages I've ever done. Fencing, as Sean referred to, was an issue of concern with Meadowwood and Windermere communities, and we're going to provide a solid fence. We will be decommissioning some manholes that are creating overflows. And then one other thing that I did not mention, and I'll refer to here, is what I would characterize as town life safety. The fire chief and the police chief would like us to create an emergency access point here that would allow Meadowwood residents in this area, if they were to be cut off for some reason here, to allow them to pass through our property to get over to Princeton, and also to the extent that there's a need from fire police, that they could communicate from our parcel over to the Meadowwood community. So that will be something that the town's request and that we will provide. Windermere, I think I would characterize the concerns of the Windermere community as concerns about traffic going through their parcel as a shortcut, and that's where the traffic calming measures I've referred to, the radar control boards, the signage, I think will be very useful in addressing that. Again, we'll be maintaining the tree buffers and the planting. Whiteman Street, I think, the concerns of those abutters are proximity to the parcel, to our structures. We've moved them. I don't think we've moved them enough to make some of those neighbors happy, but we've done the best we can. And now, it's really about screening with trees, with plantings, and other tools to make sure that they're not being adversely impacted by those 3-story or 2.5-story structures. And this is, again, just kind of a summary. And this is a section that was prepared by Commonwealth Design Group. And we've done this with quite a few of the properties in the area where we're looking at the view lines from the front door of that home, and then looking at proximity to lot lines, existing foliage, and then distances to to other plantings. We use garages as visual buffers, as well as fencing, and then ultimately to that structure. So we've really dug in, and as I said, this is not done. We still have more work to do in addressing these concerns and coming up with solutions that will create the screening that these neighbors desire. But we've gotten very, very granular in this effort.
And Mark, you might mention, I don't want to interrupt and I don't want to make this longer than it needs to be, but the placement of those perimeter fences is not literally on the property line either. Through conversations with the abutters, there's a lot of existing vegetation, and people have had those views for forever, and the idea of kind of those plants, while not technically theirs, visually they are, so we pulled those fences back, so they're starting to be a little more integrated into those tree canopies and buffers, so that once again they minimize the impact visually.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so, so we're really rolling this. This is going to remain part of the process, assuming that there's an affirmative vote at the special town meeting. This project would still fall under site plan review, and Attorney Robbins can talk a little bit more about that. So we've done a lot of legwork. There's still more to be done. There's still considerable town oversight that they will have in making sure that this is a great project for the town and for the abutters. If there are no further questions on this, I'd like to jump over to the development process and allow Attorney Robbins to speak.
Any further questions? Hearing none, please proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mark. So yeah, we've been working on this planning process for some time. As you can see, I think the first meeting was May 13th, 2021. As this board, I know, can imagine, this committee can imagine, this process has taken some time, just from its infancy, trying to decide what the layout design would be, what the best avenues for the Board of Selectmen would be, and the planning board, and then meeting with all the abutter groups and trying to meet with any board, committee, or department that wanted to meet with us took some time. And then incorporating those changes into the 2 separate agreements also took some time. But that's where we are to date. We have the warrant article drafted. We have the development agreement drafted. We have that final meeting with the Board of Selectmen next week. And the planning board, as you know, has already voted to proceed with this warrant article. And now the special town meeting is scheduled for February 24th, 2022. Mark, I don't think there's another slide on this, but just so I can let the committee know.
There is. There's a couple more actually.
So we do already have our resource area delineated through the Conservation Commission. So we do know where our resource and wetlands are, so we do have some real information on the setbacks and design that we've used to come up with the plan that you've seen probably circulating everywhere. And it was one of the first slides that Mark showed. So the first issue that I think probably comes up with this overlay is how it satisfies this MBTA community site. And there's really two parts of this. The Mbta Community Act actually came out of the Chapter 358 of the Acts of 2020. Some people call it Economic Development Legislation of 2020. Some call it the Housing Production Plan. But really it has two prongs to it. The first prong is if you're an eligible location and you create multifamily housing, it changes the voting threshold for town meeting. So if this proceeds to town meeting to a vote on the floor, it would only need a simple majority vote, not a supermajority like other voting overlays that you've probably dealt with in the past. The section that Mark has here is the opinion letter from the Commonwealth that we are designated an eligible location. The other part of the MBTA statute is regarding the designation for many communities, just like the town of Chelmsford, that you're an other served community under the statute, which means you are subject to the Mbta regulations. Now, the Mbta draft regulations have come out. They're still in their comment period, so they're not final. But the basics of it is that it's going to require a zoning district or many districts in the town of Chelmsford that have at least 15 units per acre by right. Okay, so the overlay you have in your packet actually provides for a production on the site that allows for 15 units by right. The development agreement that I'm sure you've seen circulating has and was a part of that linked package that you were forwarded actually proposes less than that, but it would still satisfy the requirement, we believe, under the MBTA communities. Now, this site, according to the draft regulations that are out there right now, may not satisfy the town of Chelmsford's MBTA community requirements altogether, but it'll certainly be a huge step in the right direction. What will happen if the town of Chelmsford doesn't comply with the MBTA community regulations as of right now, as the regulation states? The town of Chelmsford would not be eligible for state funds. There's three iterated, which are Mass Work grants, Housing Choice grants, and Local Capital Project Fund grants. So those would not be able to be applied for by any community that does not satisfy these requirements. There's 300 pages of this legislation, so I won't get into any more details. The draft regulations are out there. I know your town council's on this call as well, so if this committee has any questions about that, I can answer them, or town council and Mr. Haverty can answer them as well. But that's really it in a nutshell. So what this does is creates an overlay that's meant to satisfy those requirements. It leaves the underlying zoning alone. And then we would have to proceed with site plan review at the planning board should the town meeting approve this overlay. That's presuming, well, after town meeting presumably approves it, it would go to the Attorney General's office for approval, and that generally takes about 90 days. And then it comes back to the town as approved, and then we could apply for site plan review, and we would go through site plan review with the planning board. And would also have to file for all other necessary permits through the town, like a notice of intent through the Conservation Commission. If anybody has any questions on permitting, on the permitting side of things, I'm happy to answer any questions, and if not, I'll turn back over to Mark.
I'll defer to Mr. Chair. Are there any, and the board, if there are further questions?
Yeah, I actually have a question for Town Council Paul Haverty. Hi, Paul. How are you?
Good, Mr. Chairman. How are you?
Good. Jim's fine.
Thank you.
So we're MBTA adjacent, essentially, under these proposed guidelines. I know that they're still going through committee, that they're looking to finalize the regulations, and it hasn't come to that point yet. I know that the plan is for communities that are adjacent, as opposed to being served by or being one of the original towns that were affected by the Mbta lines, are going to have or proposing to have a lesser obligation than those that actually have those in there. Do we know what that current breakdown's going to look like? Do we have any idea of what that's going to look like?
Currently, the proposed, and I don't think they're going to be regulations, I think they're going to be guidelines.
Guidelines.
But currently, they're calling for a 50-acre minimum zoned area for multifamily housing. So it would be 50 acres times 15 units per acre.
Okay.
So this one development, and it's a 25, you have to have at least one area that's at least 25 acres. So this particular, and Melissa can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 34 acres approximately. So we would satisfy that prong, however, we would not satisfy the total 50-acre requirements.
Okay. And the designation of acreage is including any wetlands, restricted areas, or anything of that nature. It doesn't necessarily negate those locations because of their inability to be used for developable land.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
No, that's it from me, Paul. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and members of the Finance Committee, as I mentioned earlier, my entire professional team, unfortunately excluding Mr. Frigier, is available. If you have any further questions, I'm available, as is Attorney Robbins. We'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
Open up to the committee.
What? I don't know if you heard me at the beginning, so I'll ask the same question I did at the beginning of our meeting. Why can't this wait for our April normal town meeting to decide this issue?
Well, it certainly can. The conversation, while our first official meetings with the planning and select boards were in May, we had conversations with various parties back in January of last year. So we're coming up on 12 months of this process. Early on, the target was for the fall meeting. And it was just that we didn't hit that. There was a lot more that had to be done. But based on missing the town meeting, it was then suggested, well, let's target a special town meeting. Does it have to be in February? I don't think it has to. It is certainly our preference. In order to get this project moving, even were there to be an affirmative vote in February, there's probably still a 6-month lag just in terms of the AG approvals and the site plan approval process of the town. Then we need to release design. That process is 9+ months. So, it isn't that it has to be, it's just that, if you don't pick a date and shoot for it, then we could always kick the can to the next date. By no means is it our desire to put any members of the town at risk due to COVID, and I'll defer to the town manager, the moderator, and the Board of Health for that guidance. But I do think that picking a date and aspiring to it is a good practice to try for.
Thanks for answering that. I appreciate it.
Any further questions for any of the presenters or the team with the presenter?
So we're still waiting for the water assessment, right? Did I get that
Yeah.
correctly?
Well, and as I
We don't
mentioned,
know the impact yet.
we have received a will serve communication from the district. So the district has said that they can accommodate the demands of the project. But for a project this size, they would like a water impact study. So that is in process.
Just want to clarify that, Jim, if I may, or add to that. I think all expectations that any infrastructure upgrades are not going to be borne by the ratepayers. I think the superintendent's email to an interaction with Trammell Crow, particularly at an interdepartmental review meeting, at least my interpretation was that any infrastructure upgrades, looping, things of that nature are going to be borne by the project, not by the ratepayers.
Yeah, anything on our site is on
It may even extend off-site.
Yeah. Yes.
And of course, this is still subject to special permitting. This is the zoning changes. They still have to go through the permitting process and meet with the planning board and things of that nature. So although the water study's not done, does not mean that it won't be addressed later on in the process. Thank you for the clarification, Evan. Any further questions? Eric, Sam, John, you guys all set?
I'm good.
Okay. I'm sorry? Good, okay. All right, hearing none, thank you very much for your presentation this evening and for presenting and being here and going through the thorough explanation of this article.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Have a good evening.
Thank you. All right, next on our agenda, we have, just a second, adjust this here. A presentation review of warrant Article 6, the funding for the senior affordable housing, 255 Princeton Street. And David, you're still on the hook. So let me pull up that article here. It's a long zoning article. Hold on. I'll make sure we didn't miss anything here. All right, Article 6.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Article 6 is a funding request through the Community Preservation Fund and the Affordable Housing Stabilization Fund. As you can see in the slide on the screen, the appropriation from the Affordable Housing Stabilization Fund would be $680,000, and there would be an additional $555,000 from the Community Preservation Fund General Reserve for the construction of these senior affordable housing units at 255 Princeton Street. I can tell you that the Community Preservation Committee has met, and they have voted to support the funding for this project. It would come from their general reserve, as noted there, and I believe the Planning Board will be discussing next week with David the appropriation from the Affordable Housing Stabilization Fund, the balance that's in there now. So with that, I'll turn it over to David Hedison, who can review 3 slides that he's prepared regarding the affordable units at this site.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here this evening and present information on our request. Yes, we presented to Community Preservation for funding for the development of 54 new senior supportive housing units at the campus. We're looking for a total of $1.235 million, of which $680,000 will be coming from what I call the payment in lieu of fund, which Town Manager Cohen had said is the Affordable Stabilization Fund, and then another $555 from Community Preservation. So we're looking at about $22,870 per unit, and with that, we'll be using that to secure about, well, say at least $11 million of federal and state funding dedicated to the development of additional affordable rental production. The funding structure for this project is going to be similar to the Choice Center, which is the senior development behind the senior center, the furthest back. Or you could say it's a similar financing structure as Chelmsford Woods on Littleton Road. It's being developed through Stratford Capital Group and partner Choice, our nonprofit. Right now, we really have been involved in the Umass West site for, I mean, I hate to say this to you, over 20 years trying to secure this site for the development of affordable housing. And now we're at the place where we do not control the site, but we've been very fortunate to have a developer that's willing to work with us. And we were able to negotiate a location on the site to accommodate this building. And we're looking at a building that will be 3 stories, pitched roof. All of our 1-bedroom units that we do for our seniors are in the range of 625 square feet, all the way up to 700 square feet. The larger units usually for those units that are handicap accessible. So we're looking at submitting a funding application to the state of Massachusetts end of 2023, 2024, with the hope of receiving funding within 12 months of submission and seeing this building built. So if we can just scroll down to, let's see the next slide. I'm actually looking at the slides on my computer, but if you go down to the next slide. Whatever's. It's okay if you can't, I can tell you about it. We'll go on. So one of the interesting parts is, so it's going to be a mix of affordable, all 54 units will be affordable. There is a slight chance we may be able to go up to 58 units, but we wanted to keep it at the minimum at least 54 units. And it'll be at different income levels for people. So there'll be some units where the seniors will be paying only like 30% of their income, like we have at McFarland Manor and Smith Street. The other developments will be a flat rent at an affordable level. So if you know anyone that's 62 or over, in about 4 to 5 years, this building will be ready for occupancy. And instead of getting on the waiting list over the Choice Center where it's 3 to 5 years, they may have better luck with this building. So we'll have some community rooms, community kitchen, resident lounge. We'll be providing supportive services. There's a push by the state for us to go 100% electric. Right now, we're committing to everything electric except for our hot water. The next slide. Great. And this kind of shows you where our building would be. It's basically a center core entrance with 2 elevators and a wing on both sides, 3 stories. And it's really, it's going to be a gorgeous building, I'll say that. And I'll leave it at that and probably just accept your questions at this point.
Thank you. Any questions?
Just one that actually was prompted when I was reading the minutes of our last meeting. So the September meeting we had, we moved some like 16 grand into the stabilization fund. Jim, I think you'd made the comment, at least it was in the minutes, that the fund balance was 620,000. This warrant is asking for more than that. So we've increased that fund in the last 3 months to that amount.
If that's a question for me, I don't have the answer. I don't know if that was for.
I guess it's for anyone that might know what the actual balance of the account is, given that we're asking to take out more than it was reported the last time we met. So we're just trying to confirm the balance.
Darlene, do you have the
Yeah, you're asking for the balance that's in the Housing Stabilization Fund?
Yeah, Affordable Housing Stabilization Fund, yeah.
Hold on, I can actually give you the exact, hold on 1 second, but I think it's like around the 680, but.
Yeah, I can.
Hold on 1 second, John, do you have
I
it?
can help you. Yeah, I can help you with that. As of December, it was approximately 637,857. I'm rounding off to the nearest dollar.
So the warrant asks for, can you go back to that first slide, Jim? So we're taking 680 out of something that has 636 in it.
And, okay.
Which seems
That would be an issue.
seems like funky math.
Just, hold on 1 second. I just want to see if there's anything that might be going into that account. Collect. No.
We had a small contribution back at the last town meeting that I recall in October, but that should be reflected in this balance.
Yeah, that's reflected in the number. It was 16,800, I think it was.
Would you account for that change, Eric, between the number we discussed in September 23rd?
Yeah.
My suggestion would either be to see if we can obtain a contribution of, about 43 to 50,000 before the town meeting vote, or just change the allocation between the Affordable Housing Stabilization Fund and the CPC amount.
And just to note, so this started off as a request for 1.235 to CPC for the full amount to take whatever was available from the Affordable Housing Stabilization Fund, and the balance be made up by community preservation. And I know there was quite a bit of numbers flying around the room when CPC took the vote to support this project in the amount of 1.235. And just last night, I know we were going back and forth on the number. But even if we have to reduce the number by $30,000, it's not something that would
Be fatal to the project.
Right, it would not be
There is-
fatal.
There is enough money. I mean, there's the CPC general reserve does have a balance that could, it could, if the committee would go ahead and approve and add the remaining balance to the 555 of what he needs to be made up from the 680. I'm sure that, I mean, there's enough money there, so I don't see a problem with that.
And we just get the exact language of the warrant as published for this particular article. Was there a specific number associated with it, or was it simply to raise and appropriate funds from those two? I believe it's from just those two. So the numbers can change.
Yes.
Because of that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Want to make sure.
Chairman Clancy?
You can go down, you can't go up.
Okay. Oh, that was my question. Okay.
The article was sum of money from the funds. There was no article in the warrant. There was no dollar amount in the warrant.
Perfect. That's what I wanted to confirm. Usually that's the case, but there are specific numbers here as it's presented. I want to make sure that was actually the case. All right, thank you, Paul. All right, well, we'll certainly take that into consideration, any vote that we put forward concerning the article's approval. Any other questions? All right.
Can I just say thank you for all of your service? Sorry.
No, thank you for yours. All right. Moving along, we have a review, discuss, and a vote on the February 2022 special town meeting warrant articles. So I'm going to bring us back to slide 1. And our normal motion maker is not here this evening. So I'll entertain any number of people on the Finance Committee who would like to serve in that capacity this evening.
I can read. I'm not reading number 5 though. That's way too much.
Usually as presented is sufficient. General description. Sometimes the motion that's made is a little bit verbose, and it doesn't need it's to Kathy's credit for reading it, but don't need it quite as specific as that.
All right. I guess this first one I can read. It fits on one page. I'll make a motion that we recommend approval of Article 1, which is the town authorizes the select board to acquire for the purpose of obtaining a secure and public right-of-way along Esther Drive containing 11,140 square feet. It's depicted on a plan of land entitled Roadway Easement, Ledge Road, Esther Drive, Chelmsford, Massachusetts, prepared by Chelmsford Department of Public Works Engineering Division, dated October 2021. The subject parcel is identified by the Town Assessor's Office as map 7, block 4, lot 32. The subject parcel contains frontage on Ledge Road, Esther Drive, and Oak Hill Road. It contains 1.37 acres and shown as lot 2 upon a plan recorded with Middlesex North Registry of Deeds and Plan Book 171, Plan 145. The purpose of this taking is to allow for the construction and roadway safety improvements to provide safe access from the homes located on Esther Drive and Ledge Road as set forth in the right-of-way plan, and to further permit school bus access to the dwellings on Esther Drive, and further to authorize the select board to acquire these parcels or easements through any and all means available under the general laws of the Commonwealth, including without limitation by donation, purchase, and/or eminent domain.
Do a second. I think Sam said second, although it didn't come through on the microphone.
Second.
All right. Discussion.
Well, Jim, help me out. How can I vote for any of this since I object to it?
You can certainly vote to abstain or to vote it down if you wish. I don't think whether
I'm
it's...
not against the articles, I'm against the meeting.
Well, what I would say in that instance, David, is that we're voting on the substantive articles whenever they may be presented. If there's a change in the date of the meeting based upon concerns that's made by either the committee and or person responsible for making that decision, and I know that's been up for question and debate for the last year. Essentially, we're voting on the articles. So these articles, whether they're presented now, whether they're presented later on, we have to. Well, we're tasked with reviewing and providing our recommendation on them. If you choose to vote down or abstain, I will certainly note that in the report. That is your decision, and you can state why you made that decision, and that's fine. I'm not going to persuade you either way, other than to say that we're tasked with reviewing and providing a recommendation pursuant to the presentations that have been made.
Thanks, I needed an out. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, will we vote by roll call? Sam? Yeah, we can't, for some reason you're not coming through, Sam. I think you said aye. Yes, okay. Eric?
Aye.
John?
Yes.
Anita?
Yeah,
David?
Yes,
And I'll vote yay. That's 6 in favor, 1 absent. Article 2.
Make a motion that we recommend approval of Article 2, and the town authorizes the select board to acquire by purchase, gift, eminent domain, or otherwise a parcel of land containing 0.04 acres, more or less, which is identified as 4th Avenue, shown as Lot 4 on Assessor's Map 18, Block 75, and more fully described in a deed recorded in Middlesex North Registry of Deeds in Book 4976, page 317. Said parcel to be held under the care, custody, and control of the select board for general municipal purposes, and further authorize the select board and town manager to take all actions necessary to acquire said parcel.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
Discussion. I think this continues a recent pattern of small parcels that may be beneficial just to take on it rather than to wait for it to be an expensive tax title and taking. Any further discussion? Hearing none, vote by roll call. Sam, you can raise your hand. you could try to see if we can hear you again, Sam? And we can't hear you still. Can you raise your hand if you're in favor? Thank you. Eric?
Aye.
John?
Yes.
Anita?
Yeah,
Dave?
Yes.
I'll vote yes, so that's 6 in favor, 1 absent. Move to Article 3.
I make a motion that we recommend approval of Article 3, the dispatcher's collective bargaining agreement, and the town transfer $82,050 from the general stabilization fund to fund an employee contract agreement between the town and American Federation of State and County Municipal Employees, Local 1703, Council 93 dispatchers for the period of July 1, 2019 through June 30, 2022.
To a second?
I second it.
Okay. Thank you. Discussion?
I still think this is a double dip.
No, so the way it was explained in the presentation, John, was that the 1,500 is for those that were employed after July 1st or before July 1st and no longer employed, because we can only fund back 1 fiscal year. We can't fund back further, and that this was to address those individuals that were not getting the full 4% for 2021 because of that marked delineation.
yeah, because you do the math,
That wasn't clear when
Right.
he described that.
I'm just repeating what I heard from the presentation. So, Paul, I don't know if you can add further clarity.
I can maybe ask Darlene to explain it because she did the calculation.
Okay.
If you want. Yeah.
Darlene, if you don't mind.
Okay, so the first fiscal, so this is going over 3 fiscal years. So the fiscal year 2020, we can't go back to 2020 to do a retro. So so there's no increase. What I do to come up with a retro, so in the contract, it does say though, for fiscal year 2020, because we can't do a retro, we just did a quick calculation of what 2% might be. And again, this was just on base salary, not on their overtime and all that. Would come about $1,500. So for the first year, we're giving each dispatcher $1,500. So basically, so there's no percentage. But now what I have to do is, the last contract ended in fiscal year 19. And I have a salary table that says 2019. I go next to the next salary table and I make it for 2020 with a 0% increase. Then I go to the next year's contract and I bump that contract up by 4%. Basically, the fiscal 2020 would have been 2%. But we couldn't go back, and we're not allowed to go back to do that retro. So we just gave them a $1,500 base of $1,500 for the retro. So now the next contract, I take the fiscal 21 and I bump it up 4% from the fiscal 19, not fiscal 20. I take it from the fiscal 19. So they're getting a 2, 2, and 2. It's not double dipping. It's just because the fiscal 20 there's a 0 increase in that salary table. And we're giving them that, and then, but it really is not, they're not getting a full 2% because what happens in fiscal 21, I'm actually taking exactly what they made, which would include overtime, their holiday pay, all of the things that they would get is based on their actual work, is what they actually worked. That's not the case in fiscal 20. And then I take the 21's salary table and I just bump that up by 2% to get a new rate so that I can give the retro or try to figure out the retro up until I did a retro through December. And then I tried to figure out what we're gonna need to cover us for June 30th of fiscal '22. So you're really not double dipping because it's a 0% the first time. We are giving them, but that would have actually been 2%. So the way that it looks like we're double dipping, but it would have been 2% increase, then 2%, and then 2%. It's still gonna, either way, it still would have been it's a 6% over the 3 years.
So
Do
Sally,
we make that any clear? No? Yes.
Sally, I get that, I understand what you're doing, right? Like, there's a difference between giving someone a 2% and then it's because you get compounding, right?
Right.
And you're 2% over that. But I just don't get the 15, because if you take a $100,000 person, $100,000 salary, and they got 2%, the next year they'd be 102. Then if they got 2% raise after that, it'd be 104,040 versus if you just gave them, today 100,000 and a 4%, would be 104. So there's a delta of $40. I get that, but the number 1,500 is where, like, I'm trying to understand what your base is. I'm just taking simple math, $100,000. So that's where I think you might be a little bit confused, because I do get the compounding.
Right, but Anita, had we given them 2% per year, we would have, 2% the first year, they would have gotten paid roughly $1,500, okay? We can't do that because we're not allowed to go back current year. So if you then take the next year when they earn 104,000, right? They're earning 4,000 more than your base of 100. So that's 4,000 for that second year.
Right.
You got roughly 2,000 the first year, which is roughly the 1,500, and then the third year is even a higher amount because you're now compounding it by another 2%. So when we're funding them retro, we've got to figure out what's the retro for each of those individual 3-year periods and then sum the total. That's how it works.
We agreed to this, right? Paul? Paul, we agreed to this, right?
Yes, we agreed to it because
This is the agreement we have with the union.
Right, but the point, but I want you to understand why we agreed to it. It's because had we done a standard 2, 2, and 2, it would have come out to the same total dollar amount with the retro and the current pay by doing 0.42 with the 1,500 as opposed to 2%, 4%, 6%. That was the point.
It's to address the loss because of the 0% on that first year. Yeah, I understood. Now I see what the presentation was. I get it.
So I get the math. I guess I'm stuck with, I keep hearing, we couldn't do that, so we did this, which is the same as doing that. Like it.
Right.
Right, but we didn't.
But it's legal. But it's legal.
Right. There is a big difference though, because what we didn't do in fiscal '20 is I didn't actually take the amount basically what you do is you take. I actually do a data dump of every dispatcher and how many hours they worked and all of their overtime and everything. We didn't do that for fiscal '20. So if we actually did do a 222, the first year probably would have been even more. But we can't go back. We just can't go back to do that. So we actually just took. We took what the average would be, and it would be about $1,500. So that's what we did for fiscal '20. Is we did an average of what each dispatcher would have gotten if we had given them our 2%. Each one would have been different based on their overtime and this and that. And then on fiscal '21. I took their actual working hours and I times the new rate, which would have been 4% off of the fiscal 19 salary table. And then I took the fiscal 21 salary table and bumped that up by 2% and then took their actuals of what they made through December 31st, and then I guesstimated what we are going to spend for each of them through June 30th of '22 to come up with that
It's not apples to apples, but it's the best result because it can't go back to 20. Because
exactly.
Using the simple math analogy, you just using 100,000, and I know that's not the sound. I'm just using that for simple math.
Mm-hmm.
With a 222, you'd have 100, 200, 406. But with 0, you'd have 100, then 100, then 104, then 106. So you're missing that two grand increase if you don't include the 4 and make the 1,500%. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Now that we've cleared that up, any further questions concerning it? Thank you, Darlene. Thank you, Paul.
Jim,
Yes.
no questions. This is a microphone check. Can you hear me?
Yes. Excellent.
Thank you. My wife assisted, so we had a technical difficulty, but I think it's been resolved. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Hearing no further questions or discussion, I'll do a roll call vote. Sam?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Anita?
Yeah,
David?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. That's 6 in favor. 1 absent. Moving right along to 4, the form ice rink refrigeration system. Don't read the whole thing.
What's that? Sorry.
Don't read the whole thing.
I make a motion that we recommend approval of Article 4, the Forum Ice Rink Refrigeration System, appropriation of $1,458,000 for the purchase and installation of a new ice rink refrigeration system as presented.
Excellent. A second.
We want that amended to 1538.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I apologize. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Sorry, I forgot that.
That's a friendly amendment to the motion. All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Discussion. Oh, we own it. We have to maintain it.
You would have had to do the work anyway at some point. In the near future. I mean, that's what I got out of the presentation anyway. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
Yes.
Unfortunately, lightning struck, but not the good kind.
Right.
I think we're accelerated the process here. But luckily, as Gary mentioned, they were able to find all that original both manpower and software.
Great. Amazing. And kudos to Gary for doing that. That's going the extra mile.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, so roll call vote. Sam?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Anita?
yeah,
David?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, 6 in favor, 1 absent. All right, moving along to Article number 5. Do a motion.
I make a motion that we recommend approval of Article number 5 for the Umass West Multifamily Overlay District as presented.
Second.
A second. Thank you. Thank you. Discussion.
I have a question, and I didn't want to ask this to any of the presenters. I prefer to get an answer from either the town manager or the planning director. If this does not pass, then the zoning that is presently in place stays in place. What are the development possibilities for the existing zoning? Or what would be the possibility for the existing zoning?
It's zoned single-family residential.
Okay.
Evan, you want to elaborate on what could be done in single-family residential?
Yeah, likely 22 single-family homes.
All right.
And that would be all 34 acres would be divided up into 40,000 square foot lots, and then the remainder would be the roadway. The only other option would be a cluster, and the cluster subdivision zoning would essentially have all the 22 single-family homes on the non-wetland area, so they'd be kind of concentrated. But under either scenario, you're looking at minimum 22 single-family homes.
Evan, can you also just list and what other uses can go in that are exempt uses under zoning that can go into any zoning district, including single-family residential?
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Paul. Exempt uses under the State Zoning Act would be any religious use, educational type use, and those are broadly, very broadly defined. And those have limited zoning review. They have significant kind of exemptions from local zoning.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion?
Yeah, my question is for Manager Cohen. I didn't get the sense that the schools, impact on the schools was well thought through and answers were all that clear.
This went back for a discussion to the superintendent, and he appeared for a second time, and based on the information that they have, they just sought planning money. They have not been able to make any determination in terms of where their facility plan is going at this point in time. I believe they're having, continued discussions on that, but, the question became, why didn't the school seek more money? And I think at the end of the day, from the developer's perspective, they were going to provide a certain level of financial assistance to this project. And I don't think it really, at the end of the day, would have mattered if they'd given more to the schools and less for affordable housing or what have you. But this is really where it ended up. I really don't again, it's outside of my scope of jurisdiction and authority. I really can't provide any additional insight beyond that, other than the request did go for a second time, and this is what the schools came back with.
Any further discussion?
I guess I'll speak up. I have an issue with this development, about changing, the numbers, right? I think the numbers look great on paper, but what we're missing here is what we're losing. We're losing, as someone who owns a single-family home, this will have a potential to devalue my house. If a $900,000 home gets built in this neighborhood, my house isn't worth $900,000. That's better for me because that makes the town more wealthier. So from a single family, as a taxpayer, that concerns me. Now, granted, not all these developments are going up in town come through FinCom, so I don't get to say on all of this, and it's not necessarily the fault of this one particular development. I get that. But we're also losing, $1 million house. We're trying to build businesses on 129. I know from my CEO of my company, this is his third house he built in Lexington. Guess where our headquarters are? In Lexington. I think there's an opportunity cost here that we're not looking at when we're looking at these numbers and look at how much more income is coming into the town. I worry that, we may lose that type of opportunity. And then there's also this cost for these schools. I mean, this is a lot of kids going into schools that we just don't have the room for it. I mean, we have modular units at every school except the high school. I think if we're going to change the zoning for this and approve this, then I think we should have an article to approve a building of a new elementary school. Because I think this is only, I think fair is fair, and we need to present that to town meeting reps, because a lot of kids heading into one area. And the people who are going to bear that cost, when you add incremental $1 million of revenue to our real estate taxes, and then we decide to build a new school, guess who's paying for that? That $1 million is less than 1%. So the tax bill is going to go on everybody, and we all have to take that in. And, and I've heard a lot from people when they talking about this. The first thing everybody says is, well, who's gonna build the school? Who's paying for the school?
So I think,
And that's the tax owners, tax people. And I appreciate that this developer wants to rush this and, you know, time is money, but to David's point, like, I'd like to know, you know, I'd like to see that water impact. I'd like us to really evaluate our need for the school. You know, work with us, give us $180,000 to go look at what we need for the school, let us go do that, and then come to town meeting and ask whether or not we should approve it. I'm sorry, like, to me, this is a lot of unknown and a lot of risk to the existing taxpayers.
Now, going on also, yeah, I wish the abutters that didn't agree or had issues would have come so we could have heard. I mean, all we heard was everything was great. And I would have liked to have heard from the abutters who have issues that hadn't been resolved, in all fairness. If you look at the 10-year numbers, if you look at by year, it doesn't take much if we had to add a little more cost where we wouldn't be having such a great yield. And I don't know, the traffic studies sound perfect, but I have trouble getting through Drum Hill and up Technology Drive today. I can only imagine what it might be like. Although the traffic study didn't even touch that, and I'm not sure we asked them to, so it isn't fair probably to bring it up. But I just think, I mean, we're maxed on our storage. We've got a question on our water, and we're bringing in a huge project that could have impact on our schools, everything. This needs to be very well thought out, including all the negatives, so that we're absolutely sure that this is the right thing for the town. Now, having said that, I don't think Paul would be here supporting it if he didn't. He hasn't done his homework, and everybody else.
Wait a minute, David.
Yeah.
Evan Volansky and I are not advocates for this project.
Okay.
We don't bring these projects to town. We facilitate these projects. So I just want to create clear this, because we've run into this in other forums as well, is that it's the planning department's project or the manager's project. We're not advocates for this project. Our job is to facilitate and to inform and provide the town with the information and the opportunity to decide on these projects.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay, I appreciate it. But so I've stated my concerns. I just think it's a huge project at a time that really stresses our infrastructure. And so I tell you, they did a good job presenting it.
Yes, they did. I want to bring this back to the zoning. A couple more questions. So if we approve this particular article, then we have set the stage, we've set the zoning in place for projects, either this project or a project very similar to this of going on that site. If we do nothing, and what I think I heard Evan say, if we do nothing, we have the potential of 22 housing, single-family housing units. Is that what you said, Evan?
Correct.
Yeah. So those are the options. I mean, we have the project that's before us, and if we change the zoning, it is extremely likely that that project goes forward. But we're not voting on a project, we're voting on a zoning change. So we're voting either, if the town meeting votes this down, the zoning stays the same and the potential is for 22 housing units. If we change the zoning to what is presented here, then we're going to get either this project or something very similar to it. So for me, I mean, I understand that we have the project, the proposal before us, but for me, that's the issue. This land is going to be developed one way or the other. So the question for me in looking at whether or not we do a zoning change is, what do we think the best type of development for this property should be? Should it be the residential, or should it, the single-family residential, or should it be a project like this? Now, having said all that, just as a matter of conjecture, I guess, Evan, I'll ask you, if the zoning stays the way it is, how likely is it that we would be approached with a 22 single-family residence development proposal? Is that a likely scenario in your experience for this kind of land?
I mean, I think the economics will be fairly challenging. I should also, just for full disclosure, because we've mentioned this over the last 6 months in public discussions, another very likely option is a 40B project.
That's what's going to be, yeah, right.
Yes. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, because as I said, it's been mentioned during the engagement over the last 6 months. Sometime in the calendar year 22, and certainly early in 23, when the state formally and officially issues the housing, the 40B housing numbers, we have projected internally that we will be slightly under the 10%. So this, that the 40B and the moving 10% target number has been placed on the table. We've indicated what we believe will be the 2020 census projections for the town of Chelmsford, and that I guess for some stakeholders, is of consideration.
Okay, and that was going to be you led into it, so I didn't have to say it, but that's where I was going, was the 40B. It's just my opinion, but given that particular site, and what, where it is, where it sits and so forth, I think it is far more likely that under the two zoning options, which is leave it alone or do something like this, if we leave it alone, it is far more likely that we would get a 40B project rather than a 22 single-family housing project. That's just my opinion, based on some level of experience. So to me, that's the way I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this zoning as probably the most favorable outcome overall for the town, whether it's this project or a project similar to this. And just to speak to this particular project, even though we're voting on a zoning change, we're not voting on a project, okay? But I have to say that I have followed this fairly closely, and I don't ever recall a situation where I've seen a developer do more outreach and more discussion and trying to allay the concerns of abutters and other folks that are concerned about the impact of this project. I think this has been as well thought out as anything I've ever seen. Now, obviously, it doesn't, any building project you're going to run into things that you hadn't anticipated. But this has been a very well thought out situation. I think the developer has been more than accommodating, more so than many other developers have been in the past, in past projects. So I am in favor of this zoning change because I just think that for the possibilities that we have before us, this probably represents the best long-term outcome for the town. And, obviously I share the same concerns that others have expressed, but bottom line is, something is going to be put on this land, and I would like to see the best possible project and outcome for the town. And I think it's this zoning will do it.
Just to piggyback on what you were discussing, Sam, you're right. We're talking about a zoning change. And yes, there is already a project associated with it. We'll still have to go through the process after we've changed
Correct.
the zoning, which is the first step of the first step of development agreement. The second step is the zoning. And so I agree, being outside the safe harbor, which looks like we will be outside of safe harbor, that does raise concerns for that particular project. You're dealing with a situation where there are no accommodations, there are really no discussions between the stakeholders in town and the 40B project that might go on that particular property. Economically, the 22 houses, in a perfect world, 22 houses and residential units would be great, but economically it doesn't make sense for the cost of the parcel and the development of the parcel.
It would not happen.
No.
It would not happen.
I echo concerns about traffic issues. I personally hadn't factored in the loss of Glenview and then its subsequent fire, but now that it's 10 condo units, the traffic from that location certainly has de-escalated for that. Concerning the comment you made, Anita, about the value of the homes in the area, I actually asked a leading question at the October meeting concerning this. There are studies that show that actually there might be a little bit better increase of values of property for projects like this particular project.
That's correct.
So, the studies that have been done over the years show that that's the case. I believe MIT did one of the studies. I'm trying to remember what the other. I can't cite specific studies, but there have been studies that show that specifically there's an increase in values in the areas, not a decrease. Schools, I'm concerned. I think we're all concerned. We've been trying to get an MSBA project for the past 6 years. We've been turned down every single year. I believe they're submitting again this year. Paul, is that their plan to submit again?
Yeah, and I think they'll be submitting for a middle school that all students in town would attend to. And the way the superintendent explained at the time is, even a project like this, if it brings in a dozen more students or whatever the number is, they're likely to be dispersed across all the grades, from the various ages of the students. The problem becomes that if you try to do an elementary school, then you've got most of the remainder of the town who would never receive benefit of an elementary school because their school wouldn't be on the list. So what the superintendent and the school committee are thinking is build a school in an application that would all the students in the community, across the whole community, would attend for a couple, 3 or 4 grade years. And then that way all benefit from it. So that's why they're targeting the middle school after the high school, which everybody would also attend to, wasn't successful. But I think realistically, the problem that they're going to have at the middle school is going to be the same problem they've had at the high school. Our schools are in relatively good condition compared to others who apply for these projects.
Mm-hmm. As I think we've mentioned many times before, to the credit of our DPW, we take good care of our facilities, and because of that, we're not high on the list when these projects come across. That was the discussion all along about the high school is getting a project that at least everyone could buy into because it affected everyone in town. Yeah, elementary school I think is a non-starter. And the problem with elementary school is it's still going to be extraordinarily expensive to build. And the last override to try to build a school failed extraordinarily. But the town has shown over and over again that projects that come for an override in order to fund them properly just aren't successful, which is unfortunate, but it's the truth. And so I think the only way we do get something pushed through is through an MSBA that we get full buy-in for from the community. So to try to say, well, we need another elementary school, that's great, but we don't really have the capacity. The only way we get another elementary school is that one of the current middle schools becomes another elementary school. And even if that is the need or the want or the requirement. Say, I know Parker was an elementary school at one point. Something like that. And then finally, I can't read my note, so I think I'm going to depart from that. I can't read my note. Any further discussion?
Can someone just educate me? So back to the topic of this is a zoning question, and it's we change it and allow something like this, or we leave it and we allow X number of single-family homes.
Or a 40B project.
Well, that's where the education comes in, Sam, because I can't imagine, I shouldn't say I can't imagine, because who knows in this world, but if we have this plot of land and we fall below the threshold, does someone just have carte blanche come and say, hey, put a 40B in there, and the town has no say, it's not zoned for that kind of use now, clearly, because it's a single family zoning. Like, it's not just open season, is it?
40B, state regulations, state law, basically overrides most of your local zoning control. Projects don't go before the planning board, they go directly to the zoning board of appeals. And Evan, you can certainly explain this far better than I, but the law is designed to override many provisions of your local zoning for the purpose of achieving the objective, which is to create affordable housing.
It is the counter to NIMBY, not in my backyard.
Correct, exactly right.
Right, what it means is a local denial at the Board of Appeals can be appealed to the Housing Appeals Board at the state level that can override the local denial. And that's the concern. And not to mention the other issue of the MBTA legislation, which the governor, people announced, isn't a housing construction requirement, it's a zoning requirement. But that's also in the mix in the upcoming future, which, as noted earlier, is still not clear how that's gonna settle in.
And also-
Eric, just to add to this conversation, generally speaking, 40B, there's limited negotiation, there's limited gives or donations by the developer. And that ranges from, across the board. All of what Trimble Crow presented this evening, abutter engagement, meeting one-on-one, coming up with kind of a development agreement whereby there is a significant and documented public benefit. None of that would take place, as part of a typical 40B process. The primary public benefit of a 40B is that by law, on a rental project, 25% of the units must be deed restricted affordable. So that's the primary public benefit.
And all the units count, whether they're affordable or not.
Correct.
That's the other benefit.
Correct. But in this particular case, where there is significant abutter engagement, that's the piece that via a traditional typical 40B, you would not have a developer sitting in one-on-one at someone's kitchen table trying to work out customized landscaping and buffering requirements. It is essentially a take it or leave it as proposed, with some kind of minor adjustments during a 40B process. But like I said, all of the other kind of public benefits that have been presented this evening would certainly not be part of a 40B process.
Evan, if you could also touch upon the fact that the new state 40B guidelines now mandate a 10% requirement of 3-bedroom units?
Yeah, that's been on the books for a while.
Right, so the pool impacts may be more severe under a 40B than this type of development that has fewer, larger units.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, at the highest level, while this is a zoning article, I think as Sam indicated, what town meeting is really voting on is, what is the preferred future of this property? And this is a project-based rezoning, which is a new concept to the town of Chelmsford. Essentially, you have a proponent who has come to the town saying, this is what I want to build. And then they engage with the neighborhood and abutters, town officials and town boards, and the zoning essentially reflects and allows what they want to build to be presented to the planning board. The development agreement is the legal document that guarantees that what you saw this evening and presented by Trimble Crow and David Hedison is what will get built. That is a legally binding document that runs with the land, assuming the zoning gets adopted. So if town meeting chooses to adopt this overlay and Trimble Crow chooses to move forward, that is what will be built. There will be little to no unknowns, and then you'll be, through the public process, we'll be working through the details associated with a detailed traffic study review, detailed water study by the water district. All the other options have a lot of unknowns, particularly as it pertains to abutter impacts. Where are the houses located? or if it's a 40B, where are those structures located? Where is the parking located? And what's the tree preservation, vegetation preservation plan?
Thank you. That was very helpful. I guess my last question on that topic is, if we vote to change the zoning, we, not FinCom, we the town, and for some reason this deal falls through, we still have 40B exposure, right? Nothing has changed. They can still come in and do whatever they want.
That's correct. But the development agreement remains in place. No, I'm sorry, if town, you said if town meeting does not approve or doesn't?
So if we approve it, but for whatever reason, something
Yes.
changes and Trammell Crow just backs up completely, we have the same exposure.
You do, but you have a development agreement that runs with the land and that has value. That has value to Trammell Crow.
Okay.
They don't have a permit in hand, but they essentially have a roadmap of a project that the town is amenable to moving into permitting.
They're skin in the game.
How many, what's our shortfall on 40B? What's projected?
Predicting a shortfall of about 44 units.
And will this fix
This will
that?
provide 60. So the whole key with 40B is timing. You know, we know that within the next year, DHCD will formally and officially issue the 2020 numbers. And we know that we're going to fall under the 10%. Between now and then, the state has told communities that we will consider you, we will consider your current, most recent SHI, subsidized housing inventory, to serve as a status quo. Once those numbers come out, or once the marketplace follows what happens with this project, you can be assured that developers for other properties in town in the future of this property will begin to accelerate. But it's all about timing under 40B. First one in the door, is entitled to be in the queue. So, again, that's why I think it's critical for town meeting to understand that you're voting on the future of this property. And there's a variety of zoning options and non-zoning options, but something will happen here because the auction goes back almost 4 years now, and the auction price that the current property owner, not Trammell Crow, but the current property owner acquired the property at auction was $3.2 million. And then you can layer on all the other costs associated with just trying to build 22 single-family homes. The economics, at a minimum, are very challenging.
Doesn't work.
It's also what they pay to remediate the property too, to tear the existing building down
Exactly.
as its material removal.
If we vote in favor of the zoning change, does that then apply to all future zoning issues?
No, this is specific to this piece of property.
Just to this piece of property?
Yes.
Thank you.
On the 40B, again, so if this passes at town meeting, and does this number, then are we covered, that there's not going to be any other 40B development, because we'll have this in?
It's a good question. Goes all back to the timing. If this is passed in February, April, the AG has, was it 90 days? I believe it's 90 days. So Trammell Crow indicated earlier this evening that they would, within 3 to 6 months, they would be in front of the planning board. As long as that zoning permit was issued, from the day it's issued, the town can then submit the documentation that the zoning permit's been issued, and then those units count, those 60 additional units that are intended to be deed restricted would count on the, towards our 10%.
And then that 10% stays static until a decade from now when they do the 2030 census and get the results in 2031 or so. And then the new whatever the new numbers are set at that time. So it's not as though 2 years from now they're going to have a new number. The number stays static, which the 10% is based upon for every decade under the program.
So that certainly contributes to the timeline that we're working with right now as well. All right. I think we've discussed it. Are we comfortable? Are we comfortable on taking the vote?
I'm ready.
All right.
Yes.
We'll do it by roll call. Sam?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
John?
No.
Anita?
I'm gonna abstain because I can't get myself, I can't vote. If I vote yes, I would be doing it for my own personal interest. Because there's property near my home that could be developed under 40B, and the only reason why I would vote yes on this would be to protect myself, and I'm gonna abstain from this one.
Okay. David?
I'm going to abstain as well.
I'm voting in favor, so the vote is 3 in favor, 1 against, 2 abstentions, and 1 absent. Did you get that, Pam? Do it one more time. 3 in favor, 1 against, 2 abstentions, 1 absent.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Yes, I got it.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Article 6? So let me get to it. I gotta scroll to it. There we go.
I make a motion that we recommend approval of Article 6, the affordable housing at 255 Princeton Street, for the town to appropriate $680,000 for, we know the
To
number.
appropriate a sum of money from the, I think is the best way to do it.
Change that, right.
Yeah, I think it'll probably come down to 635 from the Affordable Housing Fund and 600,000 from Community Preservation General Reserve to get you the 1235.
As presented by the town manager.
An appropriate amount is presented by the town manager in some combination from the Affordable Housing Stabilization Fund and the Community Preservation General Reserve Fund for the construction of senior affordable housing at 255 Princeton Street, Chelmsford.
Second.
Second.
Discussion? We're looking for senior affordable housing. The Community Preservation Committee supports this. I'm assuming the planning board will as well. This is a nice solution to not being able to get the entire property transferred from Umass to the town for affordable housing purposes, as it was tried a few years ago when they were looking at options to work with Umass and transfer to the state. From Dave Hezen seems excited about this opportunity, so I'm in favor of it.
It obviously doesn't move forward independently, so if the question happens, what if it doesn't happen on Article 5? We'll take no action under Article 6 if Article 5 is not approved by town meeting. And similarly, if it doesn't move forward, obviously David's not going to. He can't advance ahead of the project.
Of course. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Sam?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Nita?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. 6 in favor. 1 absent. All right, that gives us the end of the articles. Next on the agenda is a review, discuss, and vote. A discussion of future meetings, timeline for finance committee warrant book production. So we're just about a month away from the special town meeting. We've made our votes. This will be a shorter book, thank goodness. And so there's some wiggle room. I'll look to get my letter out in the next week, so people can add comments, especially for Article 5, where there were either abstentions, although abstentions, you're not required to state why you abstained. I know you did already publicly, Nita, but with an abstention is essentially a non-vote, a present vote. So you don't need to explain your abstention vote. A no vote, John, if you want to, especially on 5, just send me some talking points for the article, just so we can explain in the book, in the letter, as to why you voted the way you voted. So it'll help with the discussion that evening, and help the town meeting representatives.
They happen to do that.
Thank you. As far as next meetings, when do you think that the budget will be ready to present for the next fiscal year, Paul?
I am scheduled to release the budget a week from Monday on the 31st of January.
Okay. So I think our next meeting would likely be that following Thursday in February. What is that, February?
That's the 3rd.
3rd. I think that'll be our first meeting. So that'll be the kickoff. We'll for the new members, we'll assign, we'll discuss and assign the different department heads and departments that you'll meet with. We reshuffle and discuss who's gonna talk with whom, and then we'll also take a reorganization vote at that time, as we do every year, and then we'll see a presentation from Paul and John, both on the budget and on the capital plan, and we'll outline in more detail where we're going from there as far as our departmental meetings. My vision for this, and it may change with the reorg vote in a couple weeks, but my vision is that we'll continue to have Zoom meetings based upon the current climate and just the accessibility that it provides us, especially with 3 members traveling in the next month. I think this is the correct avenue to go. I think it's very accessible to the public as well. They will sign on and discuss and attend and get to the meetings much more rapidly than they would be in person. That and the fact that our meeting room at the town hall is not equipped for Zoom yet, and so that certainly factors into the discussion. I will say the first Thursday. That's the only question mark. So let's not set February 3rd in stone. We'll have to check with Chelmsford Media, because the first Thursday of the month is typically the zoning board meeting, and that does conflict with our meeting times and meetings. I'm sorry, Paul?
Yeah, that's correct. The Board of Appeals does hybrid, and you folks would be remote, so they'd either have to put you on a different channel or not televise you live, one or the other.
Okay, I'll talk to Pete and Baloo and see what makes the most sense. Maybe February 3rd is not the date, maybe it's the week after. I think they'll still give us plenty of time to go through, although because normally we don't hold a meeting during February vacation anyway, and that would be the date that's taken up now by the special town meeting. So we would only lose a day essentially, but I think we have plenty of time in the interim. So that's what we look like. I'll send an email around, so I have to connect with them, and we'll set the date in stone for our next meeting. The book we'll look to have out, we'll target 2 weeks prior to the special town meeting, so that we can get that out and up on the website, and also in print form. Next on the agenda is the public comment. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, I see no press in the meeting. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you everyone for a very productive meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.